Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in these southern United States. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate everybody taking the time to hang out with us this morning. Good morning, Saturday morning. Our phone is open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. We'd love for it. We'd love for you to call in. We've got a little bit more time on the program than normal this morning, so would love to hear from folks. And, you can call us about all sorts of stuff. You can call us about anything you'd like. You can call us about just general questions about unions. I got in a conversation with Dale this week about unions protecting bad employees. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is that even a sensical thing to say? What does that mean? You have questions about that, feel free. You have questions about how to form a union. You have questions about the contract bargaining process. You have questions about grievance procedure, what that is, what does that look like? You have questions about at-will employment, right to work, anything at all. Folks, we would love to hear from you. 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can also ask us about politics. We have some opinions about that. But, of course, we're union folks, first and foremost. So that's going to be our area of expertise. One time I had somebody call in, ask about, he was like, do you think that COVID originated in a lab in Wuhan? I was like, I don't know. I don't work at the CDC. That's not really, and also I don't know, and I haven't really looked into it because I don't really care that much about that. It doesn't really change, especially at the time, like what I thought we should be doing as a society. And so, I have opinions about a lot of stuff, but unions are my expertise.
Right.
So that's
You're welcome to call us. That doesn't mean we have an answer, but
yeah,
you can call us.
You can call us about anything you want. Should you go to church this weekend? You can ask us that. We'll have opinions about it.
All sorts of opinions about all kinds of things. So,
yeah.
And we appreciate all the folks who leave voicemails throughout the week. Mm-hmm. Those are really fun. So that's a good opportunity. If you've got an action coming up, an event, training, whatever's going on, or just like a local story that maybe isn't getting much attention, we love to get dispatches from folks throughout the week. I think the voicemail limit is about 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's something like that.
So around 2 minutes. So if you've got just a real quick update, 90 seconds to 2 minutes, give us a call throughout the week. Leave us a voicemail. We love to do that.
Yep, absolutely. And if you don't want to say it, you can leave us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. Last week, the Alabama legislative session wrapped up. And there was a lot that didn't pass, some of which was good and some of which was bad. Like there were some things that were good that they didn't pass and some things that it was bad that they didn't pass. I want to talk about SB 22 for a second. That's a thing that is bad that it didn't pass. SB 22, I think sponsored in the state Senate, obviously. It's a Senate bill, by Marika Coleman. That would have allowed the Alabama Department of Revenue to revoke tax incentives from companies that violate child labor law. It wouldn't have even mandated it. That was the original version of the bill, but it was watered down to say that, okay, fine, Alabama Department of Revenue, you don't have to revoke tax incentives from companies that abuse children to make profits in the state of Alabama. We're not even going to say that's a requirement. It's not even a requirement. This bill was so watered down and so mild and so milquetoast that it wasn't even saying it is a requirement to get tax dollars from the citizens of Alabama. It's not even a requirement that you don't abuse children for profit, right? It's just saying that we are going to allow the Department of Revenue that authority to take it away if they think the abuse of children goes too far, right? I mean, this is a very, very milquetoast, mild sort of bill that really is kind of astonishing that it's not the law of the land already. Like, why does the Department of Revenue not have the authority to revoke tax incentives for people that abuse children for profit?
Can I just say, I had a state legislator tell me that exact thing. He
Yeah.
said, wow, that's so common sense. You would think it would be the law already.
Right. That's what you would think, but it's not. Right now, the Department of Revenue is constrained, and they don't have the authority to revoke tax incentives because corporations abuse children for profit. I think that's bad. I think it's bad that that's not the law, and I think this should be the law. And in the defense of legislators, some of them, it did make it pretty far. It passed the Senate almost unanimously. It passed the House committee, but it did not reach the floor for a vote. And so it did not pass both chambers, and so it died. But even as I say in defense of the legislators, that is almost exactly how far this bill made it last year. And so you have to start to question, especially since this is a watered down version of the original one. You know, the original one would have said, like, okay, it's mandatory. You abuse children for profit in the state of Alabama, your tax incentives are gone. But this version is so, like, you have to start questioning the priorities of the leadership in the houses and saying, why is this not just speeding through? Like, why is this not just, you know, okay, first thing on the calendar? I think this was filed. This was pre-filed, right? This was filed before the legislative session even started. And so you have to start questioning why is because this is such a common sense sort of bill. Why is it not just flying through without, you know, conversation and stuff like that? And it's not like this is, unlike some of the bills that have been proposed, this is not a bill that is addressing a non-issue. This is an issue in the state of Alabama. Remember, in Coleman, Alabama, less than, you know, like an hour drive from where I am recording right now, a 15-year-old child could not even drive, died on his first day on the job. I believe that's true, that it was his first day on the job. But he was 15 years old. 15 years old, you don't have a driver's license. Couldn't drive, fell off of a roof, and died. Right? We have had the U.S. Department of Labor suing employers in the state of Alabama for, quote, this is the language of the U.S. Department of Labor, oppressive child labor between July 2021 and February 2022. That case has still not come to an ultimate resolution. But dozens and dozens of people, 13, 14 years old, working in manufacturing environments, which are, you know, manufacturing environments themselves are very, very dangerous. You know, that's why there are, within the child labor law, there are further restrictions on children working in manufacturing environments. You know, children can work in other environments more easily and with fewer restrictions than they can in manufacturing environments. But this manufacturing environment in particular, the one that I'm thinking of, it had 13-year-old children working there, and this was a place that had only a year before had $50,000 of OSHA citations for, I think it was decapitation hazards and crush hazards, right? And so this isn't even just the normal manufacturing environment is scary and dangerous. This is a manufacturing environment that is so dangerous as to be illegal for adults, right? This was illegal safety standards for adults, much less children. And so this is not a problem that does not exist in the state of Alabama. And yet, our legislators could not make it a priority to get this passed. And so you have to start questioning, like, what's going on there? Why was this not brought up before to a vote? Who is donating to these legislators that makes them not want to pass this very, very common sense piece of legislation? What is going on there? So the legislative session ended without passing this bill on child labor, which again, just to reiterate, because it is so milquetoast, it allows the Alabama Department of Revenue to revoke tax incentives from corporations that violate our child labor laws. And we couldn't get that passed. There were some other bills that didn't pass, though, some that are probably good that they didn't pass. Adam, what are we looking at there?
Right. Well, there were several good bills in addition to SB 22 that did not pass, and I'll circle back to that. But there were some terrible bills proposed that also died at the end of the session. I know Senator Elliott had been pushing a bill to take over the Department of Archives. And a lot of folks I know in history circles and in just in the cultural arts space, were very, very concerned about that. It was going to, deeply politicize the Department of Archives, and it's really in retaliation for some exhibits that they've had over the years. So that's a good one. I'm glad that died at the end. There were also a rash of just anti-immigrant bills that were proposed this year. It's clear that many state legislators were, taking some signals from Washington, D.C., and so there were quite a few bills that were proposed that would target, immigrants. Theoretically, most of them were targeting undocumented immigrants, but they were written in such a way that would clearly lead to additional harassment and targeting of immigrant communities broadly. So a few of those bills that did die at the end, one was HB 304, another was HB 297, one was HB 3, which would have enhanced penalties for crimes committed by undocumented immigrants. There was a bill that would have actually not counted English language learner students in regards to sports classifications of schools, which is an interesting thing to be spending your time on in the state legislature. So yeah, there were quite a few immigration bills that were proposed this year. Unfortunately, in a lot of people's eyes, there were some that did pass, despite a lot of opposition. I know, Alabama Coalition for Immigrant Justice and quite a few other groups were active against some of these bills. Because some of them, are going to make it a lot harder just to live in Alabama communities if you even appear to be an immigrant. And that's the concern, is that racial profiling and targeting by law enforcement is going to increase. There was a bill that would have allowed local law enforcement to enter into MOUs to enforce federal immigration laws. That one did die. That was HB 7. So that would have ramped up the immigration enforcement even further and entangled local law enforcement even further into that operation. So that did die at the end. But unfortunately, there were some good bills that died at the end as well. And I don't know if you want me to go ahead and mention a couple of those, but
yeah, go ahead.
We've talked on this show about the broken parole board here in the state of Alabama. It's so broken that they went from following their own guidelines 6% of the time to 20% of the time. And we're supposed to be pleased with that. There were quite a few bills this year proposed that would have tried to improve the parole board system here in the state. I mean, and just for context, right? Alabama has one of the highest incarceration rates on planet Earth. We lock up more people than almost anywhere else on the planet, and our prison system has been found to be unconstitutional, right? It violates the rights of its inhabitants every single day that is in operation. That has not been resolved. And feeding into this crisis is a broken parole board that, again, does not even follow its own guidelines in terms of releasing people who have, quote unquote, done their time, have, demonstrated that they are ready to go back out into the free world, so to speak. So there were several bills that would have tried to improve it. One was actually by a Republican, Clyde Chambliss. Senate Bill 324 would have just been a straight up, expansion of the parole board. Hey, let's put some more people on this board to try to make it a little more effective. Unfortunately, for a lot of folks, that one did die as well at the end. But on that, there was one piece of potentially good news, which is there was a budgetary provision added that will force the parole board to actually report to the legislature if they want to receive their funding. So there was at least a minor step towards accountability of our broken parole board system. But really unfortunate to see some positive bills on criminal justice reform and voting rights. That, again, to your point about SB 22, in most cases were very mild, very just modest tweaks to the system. Yeah. But, were not prioritized. And it's really unfortunate because the state legislature did spend a lot of time discussing red meat issues, talking about transgender athletes and books in the library that, they deemed offensive. They spent time talking about religious education, all sorts of things, so it shows a priorities in terms of what gets passed and what doesn't.
Quirky Geek Girl says, good morning. So many terrible bills happening all over. The child labor law reversals are horrid. And that is, we had one of those bills. It wasn't ultimately just a huge change to child labor laws in Alabama. But last year we did roll back some of our child labor laws, which makes it all the more egregious that we do not now have at least a mechanism to pull back tax incentives if the further weakened child labor laws are violated.
Right. And there's one last thing I want to say on that, which is last year, Alabama passed Senate Bill 231. And this is a bill written by ALEC, the billionaire-backed special interest group that writes a lot of this kind of legislation, shops it around from state to state. It came from Tennessee, and then it went to Georgia, and then it came here to Alabama. And what this does is it takes away tax incentives from companies that voluntarily recognize a union, right? So if the workers organize and they show up to the boss and say, hey, look, we've got a majority of folks have signed cards. We're a union now. The company has the right under federal law to voluntarily recognize it and begin bargaining and move forward with the process, right? There is no need necessarily for a secret ballot election with the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB. However, the state of Alabama has made it very, very clear that it expects employers to not reasonably deal with their workers when they organize, right? So they will take tax incentives away from a company if it voluntarily recognizes a union, but absent passing this bill's SB 22, they could violate child labor laws. So the state of Alabama believes that corporate behavior towards their workers organizing is more important than corporate behavior towards children, right? They are placing a priority on companies attacking unions, and they think that's more important than companies exploiting children.
Yeah, it's insane. The Uncle Rico says, good morning. Steve says the U.S. isn't good at enforcing anything when it comes to workers. Indeed. True American says, imagine being mad at Trump for wanting a better working environment to bring back companies with slave labor and who knows what laws. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Feel free to call in and clarify. That wasn't super... I did not receive that as very coherent. We do have a caller on the line, though. The caller is from a 256 area code. Let's go ahead and bring them on the air. 256 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Press Secretary Dwayne.
Hey, Dwayne. Good
Hello,
to hear
Jacob.
from you.
Hello, Adam.
Yeah.
Great to hear from y'all. I wanted to tell you, I've been involved in all the things that you're talking about right there, like intimately at the Department of Corrections, at sites protesting, and I wanted to tell you, if you don't mind, I've got a blog that will give you all kinds of information and videos if I could tell those to you for the listeners to look at. Would that be
Dwayne,
okay
you were
with
kind
y'all?
of breaking up there. You were kind of breaking up. Can you
Oh,
repeat that?
I'm trying to. Yes, I have. I'm on Quora, where I actually give out a great detail of information about the prison system, what's going on, the child labor laws, all that stuff. If I could give them for people to go look at.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah, send that to us.
Okay. I've got. Can I tell you right now?
Yeah,
Or
sure,
do
go
you- Okay. History of Horrors, the Alabama Department of Corrections on Quora. Okay. Alabama corruption. And again, guys, if you just put www.alabamacorruption all together in one word, .quora.com, it takes you right to it that way too. Both of those are take you into the whole history of everything that happened from 2013 all the way to us still not doing anything about the federal judge's order to take care of the prison situation. Did you know that the Hyundai plant had like a 13-year-old girl working there, and the Enterprise, Alabama Police Department told our Attorney General, and he did nothing.
Yep.
In advance that it was there, and he is running potentially and stating that he more than likely will for U.S. Senate, and he is not a good person when it comes to child labor, things that are happening there, y'all.
Yep.
So
Appreciate it,
if
Dwayne.
anybody wants to, thanks a whole lot, y'all. Keep up the good work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate the information about Steve Marshall. I was not aware he was considering a U.S. Senate run, but it is my understanding that he has not taken any sort of action on any of these cases that we've discussed on the show over the years. He has taken action against rules that would protect farm workers when organizing, as well as rules which would have granted a pay raise to quite a few workers under a Biden-era rule regarding overtime and salary. If you remember what I'm talking about there, basically increasing the threshold.
He also signed on to a lawsuit against the $15 an hour minimum wage for federal contractors. Just really, really bad stuff.
So, again, shows priorities.
Yeah. There was one more bill in particular that I wanted to talk about, and then there's a couple of others as we're wrapping up here. But there was one around Back the Blue, and it's just so insane that, again, like the priorities. We've been talking about how this kind of reveals priorities. This Back the Blue piece of legislation, ultimately, my understanding is that it's not going to be terribly, materially relevant, because so often when people seek redress against police officers for, violation of their rights and stuff like that, it's typically comes from the federal government rather than the state or local government. But Adam, do you have do you know off the top of your head, off the top of your mind, what in particular this legislation does?
All I really understand about it is that it does expand the immunity for police officers. In other words, it just makes it harder to, take police officers to court should they violate your rights, should they beat you, should they kill your family member, which are, unfortunately incidents that we see throughout the state of Alabama. More and more, right? It's really disturbing, the kind of cases that we've seen throughout the state of police brutality, police violence on people. And what this does, in a lot of ways, it, like you said, people typically have to go to the federal courts in those cases. But this would make it much harder to hold them accountable in state courts, and, puts up extra hoops to jump through. And, the bottom line is it's going to be that much harder to actually take a police officer to court and hold them accountable should they violate the law. And it's also, I think, a very disturbing messaging bill, because the message is being sent to police officers that their lawless behavior will be protected by the state of Alabama.
Exactly.
And that's really a concerning signal to be sent. I mean, I know that President Trump has talked about, quote unquote, unleashing the police. And, again, here again, we see, taking some cues from that. Governor Ivey made this a priority legislation this year. And the sponsor in the House is Rex Reynolds, who is here in the Huntsville area.
Yep.
I know he is a former police officer. I would hope that he would not stand behind the quote unquote bad apples who like to go around hurting people. And but his bill sends the signal that the state of Alabama has their back, and that's a big concern.
Exactly. When I see legislation and I'm trying to evaluate it, one of the first things that I ask typically, in my mind is, what problem is this trying to address, right? With the child labor bill, what problem is this trying to address, SB 22? Well, the problem is there is a proliferation of companies in Alabama that are violating our child labor laws. And many of those companies are getting tax incentives. So we want to disincentivize the real problem of child labor in the state of Alabama. We want to disincentivize that through whatever mechanism that we can. And when I asked about the child labor rollback, specifically last year, the thing that passed was previously, if you were under 16, you had to get permission from the school system to go and work, right? The school system had to sign off if you were under 16 and say, yay, verily, little Johnny, his grades are good enough that he and responsible enough that he can go and work, right? He can take a shift at the 7-Eleven or whatever. And we had the co-sponsor of that bill on our program and asked him if he was aware of a single instance, just one, in which a child who was responsible enough to go and get a job was prohibited from getting a job by the school system. He said no. There was no situation that bill, at least publicly, that this bill purported to resolve. And so, then you have to start questioning, well, who's even putting this up? And I think that, for the child labor thing, the people who are putting that up are the people who want to take advantage of children and who want to do that with less of a paper trail and more easily. And so when this Back the Blue thing is primarily a messaging bill, I think. But you have to ask the question, what is the case that police officers in Alabama are looking to and are concerned because a police officer is being punished for behavior that they do or they would want to do? That's the only thing that you could be addressing with a message like this, right?
What victims are being addressed with this legislation? Show them to us.
And they are not. There is not, in all of the coverage of this, I have not seen Rex Reynolds, I have not seen people on the right generally point to a cop in Alabama who has been wrongfully maligned, who was a good cop who the system is beating down, right? But you would have to have a case like that to justify a messaging bill like this, in my opinion. And I haven't seen one, and I think it should scare people, especially small government, conservative, folks who distrust authority, right? It should scare us that they are putting forward these bills without a theory of the case. What is the problem that they are wanting to solve? They are not sharing that with us. That's concerning to me, and it should be concerning to you. We're about to head into a break. Really appreciate everybody taking the time to talk to listen to us. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. We will be right back with Last Week in Southern Labor, and we're going to be talking to a worker on Sesame Street who recently unionized. Really excited to have that conversation. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. We will be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today, we just wrapped up a conversation about Alabama's legislative session. We are also going to be talking to a worker on Sesame Street about how they recently unionized. Really excited for that conversation. We'll also take your calls at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. If you'd like to be a part of the program today, again, the phone number is 844-899-8857. The line is open. You can also leave a voicemail at any time throughout the week. We appreciate you taking the time to leave us your thoughts if you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week. You can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you would like to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/the Valley Labor Report. We have a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And just one more note that we did ship off the last of the merch orders and the fundraising drive gifts. So if you have ordered something but you have not received it, please let us know, because there's probably been some sort of administrative error, and that's why you haven't gotten it. Finally, if you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local or national union to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that at tvlr.fm/contact.
There you are. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us.
With that, let's jump right in. Let's jump right into Last Week in Southern Labor. This is a segment that we do every week where we take a look at what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to. Here's what they were up to from the May 9th to May 16th. In new union campaigns, 20 workers at 315 Primo Dispensary in Valley Park, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 655. 45 workers at SP Plus Corporation, a subsidiary of Metropolis Technologies in Kenner, Louisiana, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, Local 1535. 172 workers at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C., filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Auto Workers, UAW. 32 workers at Vestas in Dallas, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 745. 17 security guards at Tootsie's Entertainment in Nashville, Tennessee, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Tennessee Security Union, and 16 workers at Starbucks in Tampa, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United, as did 19 workers at a location in Fayetteville, North Carolina. In campaign updates, faith-based investors who have $58 billion invested in Ford have expressed concern to the company over allegations of union busting at Blue Oval plants in Tennessee and Kentucky. In election results, 67 workers at Alotrim, North America in Lebanon, Kentucky, voted 40-20 in favor of sticking with their union, IUE CWA Local 83697, in a decertification election. 14 workers at Appalachian Power in Roanoke, Virginia, voted 14-0 in favor of unionization with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 978. Workers who had previously filed a petition to decertify IBEW Local 584 as the union representing 14 workers at Brent Electric Cooperative in Pryor, Oklahoma, withdrew their petition. 75 workers at Alamo Draft House in Austin, Texas, voted in favor of unionization with the UAW. 5 workers at Kentucky Power in Ashland, Kentucky, voted in favor of unionization with IBEW Local 978. 31 workers at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., voted in favor of unionization with the Service Employees International Union, SEIU Local 500. 10 workers at Constellation Energy Solutions in Washington, D.C., voted against unionization with IUOE IUOE Local 99, and 14 workers at Newbold Services in London, Arkansas, voted in favor of unionization with the Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 360. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals rolled back a previous injunction from a lower court that would have prevented the government from implementing Trump's plan to end collective bargaining by most federal employees, in a major loss for the unions. In strikes and bargaining updates, members of the Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers Union, SMART, at Tri-Rail, a commuter rail service in Hialeah, Florida, voted unanimously to ratify a new contract. Though the union did not include details from the contract, the union also boasted in their press release of their 100% membership at this employer in a right-to-work state. The American Postal Workers Union, APWU, say they are nearing the end game in their negotiations with Postal Service Management. And in political and legislative updates, voters in Missouri voted overwhelmingly in favor of a ballot measure that would have given workers paid sick leave, raised the minimum wage, and tied future minimum wage increases to inflation. Republican politicians voted to overturn the paid sick leave portion of the measure and to eliminate tying minimum wage increases to inflation. Republicans in D.C. are trying to cut benefits for federal workers, specifically by increasing employee contributions to the retirement system, basing retirement on high 5 instead of high 3, and instituting a pay cut for new employees unless they agree to be at will. Federal employee unions oppose the cuts. The National Association of Letter Carriers, NALC, participated in a Capitol Hill roundtable to discuss the negative impacts these provisions would have on their members, and are encouraging their members to let their congressperson know they oppose the measures. Another thing that Republicans want to do in order to fund tax cuts for the wealthy is cut Medicaid, in particular by adding work requirements. This has been tried in some states and does not increase work. It also adds paperwork that is cumbersome and is ultimately addressing an issue that does not exist. Only 3% of Medicaid recipients are long-term, non-disabled, non-workers. But the new administrative burden would be borne by all recipients of Medicaid. Matt Brunig points out the cruelty in a new piece for the New York Times. Pressure has worked, and hundreds of workers at the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, who work to protect firefighters and coal miners, have been rehired. Shortly after this was announced, though, the Trump administration said they would be cutting an equivalent number of workers from elsewhere in the CDC. A DOGE person at the VA gave an interview to Fast Company, a business magazine, where he admitted being surprised that, quote, government works, it's not as inefficient as I was expecting, and that he is surrounded by people who are mission-driven and, quote, love their jobs. In another DOGE failure last week, DOGE personnel at the Social Security Administration implemented a fraud check system to test their claim that 40% of all calls to Social Security were fraudulent. They found, I kid you not, 2 calls out of 110,000 that had a high probability of being fraudulent. This did slow all retirement claim processing by 25%. Trump came to the rescue of the banks last week. The Biden administration's Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, had issued a rule limiting most overdraft fees to $5, but this year the Senate passed a resolution to overturn it. Trump signed that resolution last week. The U.S. Committee on Education and Workforce held a hearing on OSHA that largely centered on employers being unhappy about a proposed Biden administration heat rule. Jordan Barab, a former OSHA official, spoke eloquently in favor of the rule and OSHA's mission generally. And finally, in Internal Union Affairs, Mark Perrone, the international president of the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, one of the largest unions in the country, resigned last week. Milton Jones was appointed president by the executive board. Milton Jones is an Alabamian and the first black person to lead the union. If we missed something, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll include it in next week's roundup. We will also be including stuff that was not included in this segment in the newsletter, which you can subscribe to at tvlr.fm. I was just about to go to the caller before we go to our next segment, but the caller dropped. So sorry about that. If you would like to call back in, the person was calling in from a 901 area code, you can do that, and we will take the call after we finish with our guest, who is coming on now. I believe we should have a guest in the Zoom, right? Great. So we've got a guest in the Zoom, Autumn Sanchez. Autumn Sanchez is from the Sesame Workers Union Organizing Committee. Autumn, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.
Hey, how's it going? Also, it's Sancho. I'm so sorry.
Autumn Sancho. Sorry.
There you go. It's okay.
So, Autumn, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And it's a really exciting opportunity to learn more about this campaign. The campaign is obviously, the workers behind Sesame Street have unionized. Before we talk about the campaign and why you wanted to unionize, can you talk to us a little bit about what you and your coworkers do to make Sesame Street, the show, happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So just for context, the puppeteers and our writers for Sesame Street are already unionized. However, all the producers, right, the editors, the childhood education experts, and really the people behind the scenes that keep this show and this brand alive are those that are represented in our union. So yeah, those are a bunch of the folks. We also have facility staff, those who run our licensing departments, our theme parks. So yeah, our union's really a broad cross-section of a bunch of different folks that keep Sesame Street going.
And so why is it important to have, I think that once you explain it, it'll make sense. But, when people think about Sesame Street, they just think about, the writers and the puppeteers. And so why is it important to have like childhood education specialists on staff?
Yeah, because there's so much love that goes into Sesame Street, and there's so much thinking behind the scenes. We really carefully craft not only the show, but our video games, right? Our products, to ensure that they are not only age appropriate, but that they're educational. Our mission at Sesame Workshop is to help kids grow smarter, stronger, and kinder. So essentially, like, there's just so much that goes on behind the scenes. Like, I think a great example is I help work on video games, and like something that we are very carefully considerate of is our colors, right? We want to ensure that like we can catch color blindness very early on. So we always position red and green when we're sorting, so that if a child can't sort red versus green, that's an indication that they might be colorblind. So yeah, essentially there's so much thinking and love behind everything that we do, and we need a union to support that. We need all of these workers to help keep it running.
Absolutely. And so what made you want to go into this line of work specifically?
I love helping people. And I think Workshop Sesame Street, it's just one of the best places to be. I don't know if you can tell, but I love it so much. A lot of the work that I do is really directly impacting kids that have been through, experiences, and making sure that they have resources that can help them through those. So I help run our websites, I help create video games and apps, and on our website, sesameworkshop.org, we have a multitude of free resources in English and Spanish, and these resources range from topics like grief, topics like divorce, all the way to, ABCs 1, 2, 3s. So yeah, I love helping people, and I think that really everyone who shows up to work at Sesame Workshop is there for the same reason. We're there just to make the world a little bit brighter and make sure that all kids everywhere have support.
And for folks who are listening on the radio, our guest has a big Sesame Street sign behind her, as well as a Bert puppet on the couch behind her. So definitely a fan of the work that she's doing, obviously. So with all of that as kind of the backdrop, can you talk to us about how the campaign began? You and your coworkers are obviously kind of like mission driven. You love your job. And so a lot of people, when, especially in industries like yours, where there is such a focus on helping people and supporting people, I'm thinking specifically of like teachers and nurses. There are a lot of arguments about, you shouldn't, it's selfish to think about bargaining for better wages, better working conditions, and things like that, because your job is to help people, and so why shouldn't you be happy just with that? And so I'm curious, did you have to wrestle with that even within yourself as you started thinking about organizing, and just what was the kind of first thing that kicked it off?
Yeah, well, I think really an interesting point that was brought up during our campaign is like we take care of children everywhere. And like at the end of the day, we all want to go home and make sure we can take care of our kids, which is what a union will provide. It provides job security, it provides job protections. So I think it's just really important to ensure that like all the dedication and the hard work that we give to Sesame Workshop, that when we go home, we don't have to worry about whether or not what we're getting is fair. Our campaign was really born, again, out of like the love of the work that we do. It really began in the summer of 2023 with a small group of colleagues who kind of took a look around and said, like, we love our work, we love our coworkers, and we want to not only stay here, but flourish. And so that really began our campaign, where we went around and had a lot of deep, meaningful discussions with our colleagues to kind of hear about their experiences. And really through that, we discovered that not everyone has the same experience at Sesame Workshop. There are a lot of colleagues that don't have equitable working conditions. And so we just feel really strongly that a union is going to not only protect us, but, allow us to do our jobs to the best of our ability. Because it's just so important to ensure that we're being taken care of and that our families are being taken care of. Kind of some of the discrepancies that we uncovered are that, Sesame Workshop employs a lot of folks on contracts. And unfortunately, that can extend for up to 5 years sometimes, meaning that those workers don't get the same benefits as full-time staff members, yet they work the same hours, they do the same job responsibilities. So we're talking like contract workers don't get the same PTO, they don't get the same parental leave, they don't even get the same emails from our CEO. So it's really hard because you kind of feel like a second-class worker at a place where you want to feel like you belong. And again, like you can go home after you've worked a really hard day and, think about planning a wedding or think about building your family. So that was something we highlighted. We also really want to advocate for, job security. We're looking to advocate for more promotion transparency so that those who are at the workshop can continue to grow and stay. So yeah, at the end of the day, we love what we do, and we want to make sure that we can stay there and flourish. And having a union is going to provide that for us because it's a direct line to management to, communicate our needs clearly and also work together and move forward with a solution.
I want to underline a couple of things that you said there because I think they're really important. You mentioned that the campaign really started with a conversation in 2023, and
yes.
We are almost halfway through 2025, and so we have been doing this union radio program. Both of us are union members, the hosts. We talk to union members and people who want to organize a union, and people get really, really discouraged when they have their first call with us, and we kind of go through a game plan with make a rough kind of outline of what needs to happen next, and then the next 3 months don't go exactly how they wanted it to go, and then they're just like, oh well, there's no hope. Right? And that's just, these things take a really, really long time, and here we are, you've just won your union election from a campaign that really started, it sounds like 2 years ago at least. And so,
Yes.
For folks that are out there that are thinking about organizing or that are in the middle of a campaign or that would like to organize, these things take time, and don't get discouraged, right? And I also wanted to pull out another kind of similarity to conversations that we have in with workers in industries that are in many ways just totally different from the work that you do, and yet the problems are so similar, right? So one of the big conversations that come out of like automotive plants with the UAW or UPS and the Teamsters is tiers. And you said it exactly, people who do the same job, work the same hours, and they are a second class of citizen, right? And so there are so many similar dynamics and stuff like that across industries, whether, you know, you're working with your hands or you're working on your computer. You know, there are so many kind of similarities that I think it's important to kind of underscore for folks who maybe see you know, a knowledge worker as like a different sort of animal than, you know, somebody who works in a factory, right? We have, obviously there are differences, you know, we're not going to try to deny that, but there are real similarities, and I think the similarities are the things that are way, way, way more important. And so and it also, you know, the campaign began, it sounds like, in a very similar way to all other union campaigns. You know, there are problems in the workplace, and you as workers want to have a say in how those problems are addressed. And so working at Sesame Street, I would hope that, you know, Sesame Street is an employer that, you know, cares about their employees and the work that they're doing too. And so they would welcome an opportunity to have a collaborative solution with the people who make the product. Autumn, is that how management reacted to your campaign?
No, not at all. And I really share that same sentiment. Like, we went into this process, like, not wanting to hurt anyone's feelings. Like, we were really conscientious to deliver this news with grace, you know, in advance to our CEO. And I was really blindsided and jarred by the response we received from management, which was really hardcore union busting. I mean, our lawyer said it himself. He was like, this is the worst union busting I've ever seen. And it's shocking, again, as this is, you know, Sesame Street, right? This is a show that teaches all of us, right, the values of fairness, compassion, and care. So yeah, we were shocked as well.
So and so what were some of the things that they did? Like, what were some of the obstacles that they put up to try to bust the union?
Well, first and foremost, you know, March 4th, we went public with our union, and then 100 employees were laid off the next day. I think it was a crash, but the thing is, 6 out of the 7 speakers at our block party were laid off, which felt a little coincidental. So that was kind of the first obstacle, I would say. But moving
and when
forward,
you say the 6 of the 7 speakers at your block party were laid off, that the block party is where you announced publicly that you were going to be unionizing. And so 6 of the 7 public faces of the union campaign were let go. And so
the next day.
The next day. Yeah, that seems to me not to be coincidental either.
Yeah, and they were, I mean, they're amazing, right? They were so active in our campaign, and yeah, it makes me so upset just thinking about it. But that was a real big hurdle right at the beginning. Throughout that, however, right, they didn't voluntarily recognize our union. We had to go to an election, and it was just a drawn-out process. Sesame Workshop's legal counsel drew out a hearing to 7.5 hours. They continued to take multiple breaks. They came late from those breaks. They showed up late the day of. No apology, nothing. We also saw throughout, you know, the weeks before the election, there were anti-union papers distributed around the office. We checked the printer. Sure enough, we found who printed it. It was titled No Union, and it was printed by someone who's not eligible to vote, who's not in the union, and happens to be the copywriter for our CEO. So, like,
wow,
crazy coincidence.
So where did that come from? Yeah.
Yeah, surprise. And then another horrible obstacle was that we had managers dissuading voters from voting yes. We had multiple accounts of folks coming to us saying, hey, I just got off this really crazy call, and, you know, so-and-so is saying, like, well, if you vote yes, I can't help you with this anymore. Or, you know, you're going to get this taken away. So yeah, there were a lot of obstacles, but at the end of the day, we persevered, we kept going, and we won our election with 74% of voters voting yes. So yeah, it was great.
It's really exciting. Your union is called the Sesame Workers Union. It is a part of the Office and Office Professional Office and Professional Employees International Union, OPEIU Local 153 in New York. And, I want to just stay on the union busting for a moment longer, because it is, you mentioned at the top of the interview that a lot of people who are involved in Sesame Street are unionized and have been unionized for a long time, like the writers, presumably with the Writers Guild, the puppeteers, presumably with SAG-AFTRA. And so why do you think they were so obstinate about trying to fight the union? Because it's not as if this is a company like that just has no experience with unions, and that this would be a total kind of radical reshaping of how they have to do business. I mean, this is just really bringing the rest of you kind of in line with what so many other parts of the workforce deal with already. What was the motivation there, you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because, I went through a lot of archived episodes of Sesame Street and found very early on there were so many mentions of unions. I think my favorite example is Biff, who's a union member showing up to a Hooper store getting root beer for his union meeting. Unions are not a new thing for Sesame Street. They've been on the show, right? And behind the scenes, we work with unions on a daily basis. So it kind of added to that jarring effect of why Sesame Workshop is so opposed to having a union. I think it's a great question. I think I can only take a guess. My guess would be that they might see it as an attack right now. I know that there is a lot going on and that our management is stretched. I mean, we're all stretched thin. We're all dealing with a lot of pressure, especially after the layoffs, taking on so much more work. But I would say that they probably saw it more as an attack and just have remained on that defensive ever since, maybe due to the times, due to the fact that our CEO has been at the company for 20 years. Also, the organization has been around for 55 years, so change might be new and it might be startling, but I would say maybe it's just acting out of fear and thinking that OPEIU and SWU is a foreign entity, that it's, going to burn Sesame Street to the ground, which is absolutely not the case. Like, we are the workers behind it, and we're just asking for a seat at the table where decisions are made that impact us and our families. So yeah, I would base it on fear, but at the end of the day, we're excited to move forward, and we really want to collaborate with management, which is what we wanted since the beginning, so that we can all show up every day and just help kids grow smarter, stronger, and kinder, because we're all united by that message and that mission.
And so you won by 74%, the union election. The count was on Thursday. Was it a mail-in election, or how did that work? And how are y'all feeling after the win?
We feel great. It was a mail-in election, so we had some remote workers mailing in ballots. We also had an election day in which I was an observer, which was fantastic. It felt great, even just being there on election day and seeing the voters come in wearing their pins proudly. It made me so happy. And I think at the end of the day, it's really just about the strong relationships we've formed. Like, I can name probably all 107 members of this union because I just want to ensure that everyone has, access to wonderful protected benefits. Like, I think, I always like to say, C is for community. Like, our union is the people in our neighborhood. So we're feeling really great. We feel that this is just after so much union busting that we face, this is just such a prime example of how when you join together and hold hands with your community, nothing bad can happen, right? It's only good things can happen when we all come together and move forward and support one another, even during these trying times. So yeah, we feel good, we feel refreshed, and we look forward again to working with Sesame management because we're still committed to our work every single day, and we're committed to, just showing up and helping kids.
And so what happens now that you've won the election? What are the next steps?
Yeah, I think in the immediate future, we have 7 days. Given how much union busting has occurred, how many, times Sesame Workshop's legal counsel and representative have tried to turn away voters, we are obviously nervous that they will try to contest the election results, as they've already meddled with the election. So we are keeping an eye on that 7-day window, which would be next Thursday. But after that, we're really looking forward to really just having our, open conversations with our colleagues and checking in again. Hey, what are these issues we want to bring to the table to bargain collectively? This is not that this is the fun part, because it's all, very engaging and eye-opening, and I've learned so much, but this is the part where we can kind of finally reap a little bit of what we've sown and really put our heads together and think about, what is it that we want in a contract? What is it that we want to enshrine in the contract and protect that we love about our jobs? And I think this is the part too where some of those no voters, we really want to engage them because their voice matters too. We want everyone to feel as though they have a say in their working conditions, because at the end of the day, that's what a union's for. So we're really just looking forward to outlining our issues and moving forward with our contract. Yay!
All right. Well, let us know how that goes, and we'll look forward to touching base with you again once you ratify your new collective bargaining agreement. Adam Sancho from the Sesame Workers Union Organizing Committee, thank you so much for your time this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Looking forward to that follow-up conversation.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Really appreciated hearing that story and the story of perseverance, despite those odds, and taking the time to have those conversations. And like she said, you build those relationships and you really just come out so much stronger on the other end.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. I'm going to talk about Boss Watch and maybe some stuff that happened in Tennessee. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. The phone lines are open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Got a bunch of folks hanging out with us in the chat. Jada says, good morning, Union siblings. Sending love and solidarity from Central Florida. Thank you. Electrobuzz, very cool name. Gus says, if folks haven't read Work Won't Love You Back and Worked Over are two great books about how doing meaningful work might actually make things worse. The value of the work is used as a stand-in for wages. Yeah, I think that can be the case sometimes.
And we've actually talked to Sarah Jaffe on the show a couple times over the years. Big fan of her work.
Next Generation Carriers says, city letter carriers are organizing a rally to protect federal workers in Naples, Florida, rallying and delivering a petition to the offices of Congressman Byron Donalds and Senator Rick Scott on June the 4th. So folks have some time to plan for that. If you are over in Naples, Florida, plan to hang out with the letter carriers over there. Ziggy says, the Sesame Street Union merch is delightful. S is for solidarity. Electrobuzz says, I would wear that shirt. I was also just absolutely demolished in the chat because I misidentified the puppet that was behind our guest. I said it was Bert. It was actually Ernie, according to Gus and others in the chat. Quirky Geek Girl says, also pointed out that she has an inchworm on the sign, and letter U is over her other shoulder, and Elmo is on her calendar. So, yeah, big fan of Sesame Street over there. Steve says, I've worked with puppeteers here in Atlanta. One has worked on Sesame Street. Very cool. Steve, if you'll remember, is a union stagehand over in Atlanta. Appreciate you tuning in. Let's see. Brandon said, or there was some conversation about overtime and stuff like that. True American said, my post office didn't do the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. That's a bummer. My post office did. I was actually, I'm surprised every year because now that I'm thinking about it, they've done this every year, but I always get surprised because my letter carrier, presumably through the post office, drops off a bag for me and a letter reminding me of it. Do you get those letters for the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive?
You know what? I did not this year.
Oh, wow.
I do typically, but this year I did not. I did not. I'm going to be honest.
Maybe you'll have to file a grievance against your letter carrier.
Oh, and Steve had a very important reminder that he is an IATSE, but that doesn't mean he's a stagehand because he works in film and TV. Just remember, we're not all stagehands in IATSE. IATSE has a lot of folks.
That's right.
All sorts of folks. The behind-the-scenes entertainment folks. All the kind of people behind the scenes making entertainment happen.
I'm just getting corrected left and right today.
Yeah, stop being so wrong today. You know?
Spreading fake news. Brandon said, sounds like, responding to the conversation that we had at the start of the show, Brandon said, sounds like politicians in your state are reacting to laws passed in other states. For example, we have a ballot initiative to end qualified immunity for police in Ohio. Wow. That would be very cool.
We don't have ballot initiatives here in Alabama. Unfortunately, in many states, particularly in the South, we lack the ability to do a ballot initiative. So it's always cool, like when we see Missouri, right? Because it's a rare state in the South that can actually do things like directly vote on raising the minimum wage or expanding Medicaid or legalizing cannabis or any of the other things that people in other states get to vote on, but we don't because of various reasons, right? But it doesn't seem very fair.
Yeah. Brandon says, seems obvious to me this isn't about protecting workers, or else they would be passing laws to protect construction workers and nurses who typically experience more violence on the job than police. Yeah. Or pizza delivery drivers. Palace Rill says, I personally believe no job should require workers to work longer than 10 hours, presumably a day, you mean, and 40 hours a week. And yeah, I think I think that we should, I think that there should be more disincentivization of work over 40 hours a week. I think that overtime should be increased to like double time or something.
I actually think we should reduce the working out week, the work hours of the week. I think 40 hours. I mean, we've been stuck at 40 hours for many decades now.
Yeah, we can do 32 hours a week. Everything over that is time and a half, and everything over 40 is double time. That'll be my compromise.
I'd settle for that.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go.
I mean, it's worth noting that the labor movement was pushing for a 30-hour work week in the 1930s and came really close.
Yep.
There was widespread unemployment during the Great Depression, and that was one of the ways to address it, right? Was we reduced the work week and spread the work around more. Instead of just working some people to the ground, spread the work.
We got a caller on the line, this one from a 617 area code. 617 area code, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is John Murphy. I'm calling from Naples, Florida. I'm a city letter carrier.
John from Naples, Florida. Doesn't sound like you're from Florida to me, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm originally from Boston.
Oh, really? I couldn't tell. Had no idea. But yeah, no, sorry. Go ahead, John.
All right, so the city letter carriers are federal workers, but our union, the NALC, likes to pretend that we're separate for some reason. So there's all these attacks happening on federal workers, right? Mm-hmm. And our union's like, hey, call your politician, email your politician. It's all individual actions.
Mm-hmm.
And moving forward, workers are going to see the retirement benefits, right? The proposals are moving federal workers retirement benefits from a high 3 to a high 5, which is a pay cut, to get rid of the supplemental early retirement benefit and all these other draconian measures. And down here in Florida, we're calling our politicians and we're not getting anything back. So our coworkers are like, hey, what else can we do? Right. And this is probably happening throughout the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
People are wondering, what else can we do? And we need to start practicing collective action. So we have collectively organized ourselves into doing a rally on June 4th after work, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, at the Senator Rick Scott's office and our Congressman Byron Donaldson. We're going to deliver a petition that they both sign on to. H.R. 70 for the House, and Senate is Senate Resolution 147. And then we're also going to urge them to oppose any drastic federal reforms. These are our benefits. We should not be giving our money to the billionaire class. So I'm urging other people to unite with other federal workers. We're all in this together. It doesn't matter if you're a city carrier or a rural carrier, but we need to unite with the TSA workers. And it's kind of disheartening. It's kind of disheartening right now that you see across the country Brian Renfro, the president of the NALC, wearing his red shirt that says "Fight Like Hell," but all he's doing is lobbying. And as a working class, lobbying politicians is not fighting. Fighting is taking to the streets as a collective, as a workers, as community members. And that is something we need to be doing. And we need to be doing this. And I sent an email to my branch president this morning at 7 a.m. like, hey, we're doing this, and we're going to bring a motion to our union meeting next week for our branch to endorse this action. We didn't wait. We're not waiting for our branch leaderships. And I said this to Brian Renfro to his face. Like, this is a failure of leadership on the labor movement and on our union leadership for not mobilizing us. We knew, like, anyone that has a conscious or any type of leadership role knew Trump was going to get elected. And this is not a surprise that he's attacking us. And we should be already on the offense, but we're playing defense. As the news came out yesterday with the court overturning the pause on federal workers being fired or losing the collective bargaining rights from Trump. We're just playing defense. So on June 4th, if there's any postal workers or any federal workers in Southwest Florida, please reach out to me, nextgenerationcarriers@gmail.com. This is not just the city letter carriers fight. This is everyone's fight. And we need to be building a movement. We need to put the movement back into labor. Like, it's I don't know what else to say other than, like, the future is bleak for us if we don't actually start mobilizing. And yeah, it's cool to contact your politician, like, with an email that probably ends up in a spam folder because of their software, and a phone call, which doesn't do anything. But we need to be coming out into the public and showing the public that as a unionized workforce, we're fighting for the greater good. And that is how we get the non-union workers to start standing with the unionized workers when we do days of actions. If we're not fighting for the greater good, the non-union workforce won't really stand with us. We need to be fighting to advance the entire labor movement, non-union and union. So I'm hoping other federal workers and also mostly city carriers I'm speaking to just put aside their anger towards Brian Renfro and actually start organizing in their branches, inside their offices. And don't wait for union leadership to fight for us. Like, we cannot rely on the suits and ties that got us into this mess to get us out of this mess. One person sitting in Capitol Hill is not going to solve the problem of 200,000 letter carriers. It's up to the 200,000 letter carriers to preserve our job. Just like for federal workers, it's up to the entire federal workforce to take a stand and fight back. So yeah, I'm just calling in because there's so much bad news. We talk about this. We've been talking about this in our office. It's like, since COVID, there's been not one good news for letter carriers. Like, we got beat down during COVID. We got beat down during the contract. And on the shop floor, management's coming after us with spying on us. They're just coming after us. And our union is not providing us with good news. But the good news is the union is the members, and the members are activated now, right? Like, we saw it with a historic vote no on the tentative agreement, the contract. We're a sleeping giant for so long, and people are like, oh, we want to build a fighting NALC, and it's like, that's great. Like, we need to build a fighting NALC, but I feel like too many people are waiting for their branch presidents, for their NBAs, their business agents to, like, activate us. But
yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in the labor movement, just kind of relying on the person above you for instruction and direction and sign off instead of taking initiative with the authority that you have, and doing what you can with it. So I'm really excited to see this rally on June 4th. Definitely let us know how it goes, and call back afterwards, and definitely encourage you to reach out to your local AFGE chapter, because these, especially this retirement stuff, the raising the retirement contribution rates of all federal employees to 4.4%. That's kind of, right now, it's kind of like a tiered structure. If you were hired after 2014, that's what you contribute already. But if you were hired before that, your contributions are significantly less. And so this is going to increase the contribution rates for everybody. It will eliminate the supplemental retirement payments, and it will base the retiree benefit on, like you said, high 5 instead of high 3. And that affects everybody. Something that doesn't affect letter carriers but does affect the rest of us is it would charge new federal employees 9.4% of their salary for FERS for the retirement system instead of 4.4%, unless they agree to be at-will employees and waive their civil service protection. So, there's just huge attacks coming in this reconciliation bill on federal workers, not limited to letter carriers. So, John, really appreciate your call and look forward to that event on the 4th.
Can I just finish up with one last thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, for anyone in the red states, the conservative Republican Party have the majority, so they also have the power to stop these attacks. And this is why on June 4th we're mobilizing. We just need to get a couple of these conservatives, the Republicans, to falter, to stand with the workers, and these proposals will just go in the recycling bin, so hopefully the trash, and not become a Senate bill and a House bill. So if you're in a red state or a swing state, please talk to your coworkers about mobilizing. Even if there's 3 people signing a petition to deliver it to your politician's office, to your senators or congressperson, do that and take a photo, post it. Don't be defeated that this is going to happen. We are in a moment where we could unite and fight and win. So there is good news, but it's kind of a little bit of good news that we could fight back.
Right.
So,
Appreciate it, John.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I really appreciated that call, and I just want to echo a couple sentiments, which is that everyone can take some form of action. Whoever you are, wherever you're listening from, there's something you can do to try to make a difference, whatever that looks like. And I would encourage you to do it collectively. Yeah, talk to your coworkers, talk to your friends, your neighbors, right? Because all of the unions that are impacted by federal decisions need to be working together, but all of the unions, period, need to be working together. And we need to be working together with faith and community groups and others who are out there already in the streets and already taking action and talking to their politicians. We all have to be working together to, like you said, put the movement back into the labor movement. In too many areas, we are just disconnected institutions, and we're not all really pulling in the same direction. But once we do that, we really can be a force to be reckoned with.
Boss Watch is a segment that we do every week where we take a look at the illegal actions of employers, particularly, though not exclusively, in the southern United States. Right here in Alabama, 2 women are suing the city of Huntsville, Alabama, from right where we are at, for discrimination. Both are represented by Huntsville attorney Richard Newton. Allison Ellis, a former police dispatcher, claims she faced discrimination based on her gender and religion. She is also suing Michael Dunley, a lieutenant at the Huntsville Police Department. WHNT reports that Ellis was working part-time as a dispatcher at the Huntsville Police Department in 2023 when she became pregnant with her 3rd child. Documents show that Ellis informed her supervisor that she needed to leave work early to make midwife appointments for prenatal care, but was instead yelled at by her supervisor, saying she needed to schedule the appointments on different days. The complaint said an HPD dispatch sergeant also threatened Ellis's job a few months later, saying, Allison, I might not let you come back to work following maternity leave once you pop out that baby. Records show that Ellis made an internal complaint against the sergeant because of the comment, and she met with 2 Huntsville Human Resources staff members about the issue in July 2024. Court records show that Ellis began her maternity leave in October 2024, and the complaint said that Ellis had previously discussed her religious beliefs with Danley when she began working part-time in 2023. Documents said Ellis is a Seventh-day Sabbath keeper and observes the Sabbath from Friday at sundown through Saturday. Ellis's attorney said that Danley had previously said he understood Ellis's religious observance and would not have a problem making a faith-based accommodation for her. According to the complaint, when Ellis was set to return to work in late December 2024 and early July 2025, Danley said that the only time she could work were Friday evenings and Saturday. The complaint said this happened despite Danley knowing about her religious beliefs. After plaintiff re-notified Danley of her faith-based work schedule needs, opposing the discriminatory demand he made on plaintiff regarding that, Danley refused to reinstate plaintiff and effectively fired her for that opposing workplace discrimination. Records show Ellis is asking for compensatory damages and compensatory and punitive damages in the case. The other dispatcher suing the city is Katrina Brady. She alleges discrimination based on sex and race, but you'll have to subscribe to the newsletter to see that, or just Google the reporting from WHNT because we got to get to Union Busters. This segment of Boss Watch, which covers national updates, is sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that Union Busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. So here are last week's filings. Airstream in Ohio hired LRI Consulting Services for $425 an hour. Best Virginia Heating and Cooling in West Virginia hired Miller and Amos, attorneys at law, for $90 to $395 an hour. Workers are still in the middle of a union campaign there. Verbal Beginnings in Maryland hired GRCA. Workers won that union election, even though the Union Busters did not file until after the union election was completed. Amazon in California hired North River Consulting for $250 an hour. Martinetti in Connecticut hired MAJ Consulting Services. They did not file until after the union election was over, but workers won that election anyway. And ELG Metals in California hired Labor Information Services for $315 an hour. That union election is still open. That is it for us this week. You can find us online at Facebook and YouTube to continue watching the program. Otherwise, we will see you next week. All right, folks. We're off the radio now. We're going to take a break really quick, and we'll be right back. We've got a great second half lined up for you. If you want to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. We're also going to be talking to a federal worker who was rehired last week at NIOSH. Looking forward to that conversation. And we're going to be reacting to a U.S. House hearing on OSHA. Some bosses were really upset about that, about OSHA last week. So we're going to react to that and more. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Steve in the chat, we were talking about overtime, and he said instead of 40 hours a week to get overtime, it should be like how entertainment does it. After 8 hours to 12 hours, it's time and a half. From 12 to 15, it's double time. And after 15, it's triple time. Hours in one day. Yeah, I think that's another really great way to do that, and more unions should be pursuing things like that in their contracts. I think that's really, really important stuff. Palace Real says, the problem with the post office is our unions are fractured. Not only do we have 4 different unions in the post office, but each one has different pay tables, and they all don't agree with everything. We need to come together and merge unions. Yeah, amalgamation is really important. You know, as and I think that should ultimately be the goal of any like postal union reform effort. It should be the amalgamation of all the postal unions into one big postal union. It's last year I read some stuff. Some of William Z. Foster's writing from like the 20s and the 30s. And amalgamation was a much bigger topic of conversation. Like it seems like it was a much bigger point of debate than it is today, because the kind of historical progression of unions was to initially, like, the first unions that emerged were generally like guilds and skilled craft associations, and so you had people, like iron workers, you had machine tenders, you had cobblers, and you had and as industrial capitalism developed, you had all of these a lot of different crafts working in one workplace. And so, because that's how they had organized previously, they continued to organize in that way along craft lines. And so you would have, with one employer, you would have like 12 different unions. And so obviously, if you have that many unions within one organization, you're going to, what ended up happening was the unions would be kind of pitted against each other, and they would form coalitions, and the employer would work with certain unions to undermine others, and then they would go back and forth. And so, there was a move to amalgamate and to move into, as industrial capitalism took off, there was a move to try to push the labor movement to industrial unionism, where every worker in one industry was represented by the same union. And so that is how the UAW was formed. The UAW was formed along an industrial basis, right? Because in an automotive manufacturing plant, you have all sorts of different kinds of workers, but they are all represented by the United Auto Workers, by the industry, right? And so because of the historic place that the post office occupies in American life, the post office was organized, in large part prior to, the huge takeoff of industrial unionism. So the post office was organized first along craft lines, and there has been some amalgamation since then, but there are still multiple unions representing different workers in the post office, and I think that the workers would be better served by having one big postal union. I think the same thing could be said for the rails. The rails were also organized prior to the big explosion of industrial unionism, and that's why you have literally like still 12 unions representing workers for one employer. And I think they're worse off for it. And so, William Z. Foster has a lot of articles and essays about the importance of amalgamation and how that should work and how unions should go about merging. And so, yeah, I think that the postal union should do that. I think they would be better served by that for sure. Before we get to our guest, I want to talk about this really quick. Missouri last year in 2024 during their election, they passed a ballot measure, and we've been talking about ballot measures, during the show a little bit, and how from Alabama we are kind of, we're jealous of states that have ballot measures because it is such a cool opportunity to be able to, as citizens, go directly to your fellow citizens, not about a politician or a political party, but about an issue. You get to say, as a citizen, I think our society should be run more along these lines instead of the lines that it is run along right now. Will you sign a petition to get this ballot measure on the ballot so that we can vote on it, so that we can decide, not the politicians, so that we can decide? And that's what they did in Missouri. They had a ballot measure called Prop A that did a big suite of things, but particularly it offered paid sick leave. It wasn't very much. I think it was like a couple of weeks or something. It wasn't a lot, but paid sick leave. It said if you're going to be an employer in Missouri, you have to offer paid sick leave to your employees. And it increased the minimum wage, and it tied the minimum wage to inflation. That way we don't have to keep having this debate about the minimum wage. Everybody agrees, or most people agree, that there should be a minimum wage, and most people agree that it should be higher than $7 an hour. And so they said in Missouri in this ballot measure, let's increase it, and then let's just peg it to inflation. That way we don't have to keep doing this whole thing over and over and over again. And those both seem like super, super common sense sort of things. People who get sick should be able to take time off from work to recover. Okay? That should be a bare minimum sort of thing. People who, and if you're going to be a business, you should offer a minimum rate of pay, and we should set that to inflation so that we don't have to keep having the debate. Well, even though that passed overwhelmingly by 58%. I mean, that is such a high percentage that if either party won by that percentage in the November elections, they would have Obama-level supermajorities in the House and Senate, right? They could overcome the filibuster. And so this is, 58%, especially in American political life, is overwhelming. That is a huge majority of Missourians wanted paid sick leave for workers and a higher minimum wage, and they wanted the minimum wage to be indexed to inflation. Well, even though workers in Missouri voted for that, overwhelmingly, the politicians in Missouri didn't like it. And so last week, I kid you not, the politicians in Missouri voted to overturn this ballot measure, repealing the paid sick leave portion and removing the indexing to inflation of the minimum wage increase. And so the minimum wage is still going to increase, but it's not going to be indexed to inflation. So we're going to have to keep having this debate in Missouri. And they completely removed the paid sick leave. And it's just so gross. Workers who were involved in the Missouri Workers Center participated in a rally at the Capitol to oppose to make their opposition known against this, against the repeal of this ballot measure that, again, passed overwhelmingly. Here is a low-wage worker in Missouri talking about how this feels to him.
Yesterday, while many were talking about a $400 million jet or thinking about a trial going on in New York City, I turned on my news 7:49 p.m. last night. Missouri lawmakers repeal Prop A is what I read. In that moment, my heart dropped. My stomach had this sick feeling to it. I thought about not only the days I went to work sick, the days I had to take my children to work with me with 100-degree fever because I did not have the ability to take off and take care of my loved ones and myself. I thought about Miss Carolyn, a worker I worked with at Pizza Hut who came to work sick on our shift and went home that night and died because she did not have the ability to take off and get better. Make no doubt, the decision that was made yesterday was a fatal decision. It will cost lives and it will harm our communities. Imagine having the audacity, the nerve to take away paid sick days when you as a lawmaker have that ability on our tax dollar. To take days off. I'm not going to keep. Everybody feels the anger that I feel today. We don't even have to hide it.
And that anger is righteous and justified. I mean, it is just so gross to be a politician. And, I mean, it's one thing to have these debates within the legislature and, say like, oh, I want to vote in favor of a minimum wage increase. I want to vote in favor of paid sick leave, or I don't, and these are my arguments. But at the point that the people have voted for it, then you just have to say, whatever it is, you just have to say, okay, well, that's, that is what it is. Let's maybe, we can revisit this in a few years if we still, if we don't feel like the debate is kind of adequately settled. But, the people have voted, and so, let them have what they wanted, right? Even if you think it's bad, even if you think it's not ideal, like when you have such a direct ballot measure like this, you have to allow it to go through. I mean, unless it's something like blatantly unconstitutional or, something just totally ridiculous. But this is fairly within the province of the state to do. And it is not some radical kind of radical thing. I mean, it's pretty standard stuff that most industrialized countries have for all of their workers. And so, it's just so gross. And, I mean, like this brother said, I mean, this is going to negatively impact the health of Missouri's workers, and probably it will kill some people, right? It will kill some people because they will not feel comfortable taking the time off that they need to recover. And it's going to end up, he said he knows somebody that has died because she did not have paid sick leave. And so I just don't understand how they kind of live with themselves doing stuff like this. It really does not make any sense to me. I don't know. But wanted to make sure that we got to that story for you. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857 if you'd like to call in. We'll take calls after this next segment, because right now we have Dr. Micah Niemeyer-Walsh, a researcher who is part of the firefighter health team at the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. They are also vice president of AFGE Local 3840. Dr. Niemeyer-Walsh, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I really appreciate you taking the time, and it's been a long time coming. We've had multiple conversations over the years. I think the first time that we met was at Labor Notes at a railroad workers union caucus meeting. So,
it was, yeah.
So it's great to have you on finally. I don't know why it took this long, but we're here to celebrate some good news while tempering that with some of the ongoing bad news and some even new, more subtle bad news. But the good news is that you were laid off and now you've been rehired because of the pressure that has been put on the Trump administration because of their, absurd cutting of your jobs protecting firefighters and coal miners at NIOSH. And that was so unpopular that the Trump administration had to reverse itself. And so we want to get into that. But first, I want to kind of back up and just set the foundation again for folks, and remind people about the job that you do and at NIOSH, but specifically on the firefighter team, because we haven't talked to anybody on the firefighter team yet. We've been focusing, when we've been talking about NIOSH and these cuts, we've been focusing mainly on how this is going to be affecting coal miners, but the coal miners are not the only people that benefit from NIOSH, and there's a whole firefighter health team that you're a part of. And of course, firefighters and coal miners aren't the only people. There's lots of, all workers are helped by NIOSH, but you're on the firefighter health team. Can you talk to us about the work that you do on the firefighter health team and why it's important?
Yeah, for sure. So I am part of the team it's the National Firefighter Registry for Cancer, which is basically a very large cohort study that aims to have a diverse range of firefighters enrolled. We collect, their health history, their work history, and the impetus for this was really that, there's a strong link between firefighting and occupational cancer. But most of the studies that have been done looking at like career and structural firefighters. So when you think of like a city firefighter, right? There's much less known about other types of firefighters, such as like wildland firefighters or volunteer firefighters, and also how race, ethnicity, and gender impact cancer. Because, really the goal was to look at why do some firefighters get cancer and others don't, and what can we do to reduce the burden of cancer in firefighters, because no one should be getting sick from their job. That's 100% preventable for every single job. And then my area of expertise, I also research firefighters' exposures during electric vehicle fires. So I would go to controlled burns of electric vehicle fires and take air samples to see what the potential exposures could be, because we actually don't know as much about that type of fire as we do other types of fires. So it's pretty important work. And we were all pretty shocked at the level of destruction when they began dismantling NIOSH. I think we knew it was going to be not great starting in January, but I don't think we expected it to this level. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just a little bit about what I do and what I do for NIOSH.
Yeah, I mean, it really was just awful, the amount of destruction that was leveled at NIOSH. I mean, something like 90% of the staff, just absolutely crazy amounts of destruction of the work that's going on there. And that's interesting about the electric vehicle fires. I worked in the energy division at the Corps of Engineers for a long time, and fires around emerging technologies was one of the bigger conversations that I was having during the last year that I worked there. Fires at solar on solar arrays, fires in battery energy storage systems, and stuff like that. And so much of that is still kind of, the best practices have not been definitively developed. And you were part of the team that was trying to do that. And now you're back. But the original goal of the Trump administration would have been that work just doesn't get done because there are not very many like private actors that are doing the kind of work that you were doing, right?
Yeah. So we have a lot of research partners that we do this work with. But NIOSH plays a key role in getting that research done. We were funded to do more research, and that had been halted. I think it's important to note that, the terminations of all of the NIOSH scientists beginning on April 1st was really kind of like the final blow that had been building up since January 21st. Starting on January 21st, we already had a complete comms blackout at all of CDC, including NIOSH. So we weren't allowed to go to conferences. We weren't allowed to give presentations. We weren't allowed to travel. And then not too long after that, they actually set all of our credit card limits to $1. So we couldn't even buy supplies. So it's been really tough. I mean, it's been really tough to do our jobs, since January, to accomplish the mission that we've been mandated by Congress to do. And so, it's not just that we all got laid off, it's that this has been going on for months now that we haven't been able to accomplish our mission. So even though I have my job back, what I keep saying is I really wish I had my job back that I had in December.
Right. Well, and can you talk some to that about the more general implications of NIOSH, maybe pre-Trump? You've mentioned to me that NIOSH really kind of has an outsized influence, even despite its small, the small number of employees that are there. Beyond even firefighters and coal miners. Can you talk to us about what that influence looks like, and if there's anything else that you haven't said about how Trump has impacted the agency's ability to wield that influence to support worker safety and health?
Yeah, so a couple of things, looking at the bigger picture of what NIOSH does, we're the only agency that conducts workplace safety and health research. So if there's a new emerging hazard, we're the only government agency looking at that. If there's a new chemical being introduced in the manufacturing process that workers may be exposed to, we're the only ones really looking at that, to what the health impacts could be of those exposures. And the programs that were reinstated this week after, as you mentioned at the start of this conversation, people were brought back after a lot of political pressure, a lot of pressure from our supporters in organized labor. The programs that were brought back are very important. Obviously, firefighter program, very important. The coal mine, black lung health surveillance program, very important. And the respirator certification and testing program was brought back, which is critical. However, things that weren't brought back include the folks that look at recommended exposure limits for new chemicals. So new chemical in the workplace, now there's not going to be anyone setting new recommended exposure limits for those chemicals. The toxicologists who do toxicity testing for those new chemicals, gone. And the mine safety and health program, so not just black lung, but safety issues in mines, that program wasn't brought back. And it's really important to note that the reason why NIOSH has been so effective, despite our small size, so we have approximately 1,000 employees nationwide. And again, we're the only agency that does workplace safety and health research, which impacts every single working person in this country. The reason why we've been so effective is because we are all cross-disciplinary in our research. So we rely on experts in different parts of the Institute to strengthen every single project, every single area of research that we're doing. So for example, with my electric vehicle fire research, even though I'm in Cincinnati and I'm on the firefighter health team, I rely on the personal protective equipment researchers in Pittsburgh, because one of the big concerns in the fire service is what is getting in my gear when I'm going into these electric vehicle fires, is what's getting embedded in there, and when we're washing it, is it actually getting out, or am I getting re-exposed every single time I'm putting that gear back on? So we need the PPE researchers to answer that question for this project. And then we also need the toxicologists in Morgantown to do toxicity testing on the particulate that we collect from the air to see, okay, what are the actual potential health effects if you are exposed to this from these fires? So, and those toxicologists are not brought back. So right now we're missing that's like one example of a critical piece of NIOSH that we're missing. If they only reinstate the 300-ish that they've reinstated so far, NIOSH isn't going to be able to function the way that we are supposed to function as mandated by Congress in the Occupational Safety and Health Act. So there's still a lot of critical pieces that are missing. So the union's going to keep fighting until everyone gets reinstated.
Right. And so why did you want to take this job at NIOSH? What made you want to do this work?
Yeah, so I'm actually a third generation NIOSH researcher. My grandfather was a toxicologist at NIOSH for over 30 years, and he raised me. And he kind of instilled the concept of protecting workers through science research as like a value. Like it was like normal family dinner time conversation was how you can use science to protect workers. So when that's, kind of your normal everyday environment, it was only natural that that's kind of the route that I went as well. Because once you learn that that's like an option for what you can do as your career, and having a career that helps people just is something that was really important to me. Because no one really goes into workplace safety and health research for the money. But you go to school for a long time. When I went to, I got my PhD in 2020. So about 9 years, if you consider all of undergrad and graduate school, to be able to do this work effectively. And I remember when I finished my PhD and I started at NIOSH, I told my friend who works at Google what my starting salary was. And her response was, didn't you go to school for like 9 years and that's all you get paid? And I was like, yeah, but I don't do it for the money, right? I probably could find a private sector job that paid more, but it wouldn't necessarily align as much with my values and what I want to be doing with my knowledge and expertise, right? So, and right now also, there's just actually not enough private sector jobs out there for people in my field. People are having to consider if they're going to change career trajectories after getting laid off because, there's just not enough out there in the private sector. What NIOSH does in many ways is inherently governmental, right? So it's tough for a lot of people, but again, I'm still hopeful that we're going to get everyone reinstated.
Yeah, and you mentioned your pay as being kind of below what one would expect, at least for the amount of kind of investment you put into your own education. Can you just make that explicit for folks? I find that that's kind of helpful for you and for the rest of your team. What is kind of the range of pay that folks are making on your team?
So when I started after finishing my PhD, I was a GS 12. And based on locality and whatnot, it was somewhere in the $70,000 range when I started. And through pay increases over time and through like performance, I'm now at roughly like 100K. But if I were to find like a private sector job, it would be probably well above that. Right. So, it's comfortable, especially in Cincinnati, where cost of living isn't, as expensive as some bigger cities. But it's not, a ton.
I mean, you're not making like, surgeon levels of money, right? Or anything like that, or car dealership owner, right? And I think that the work that you do is so much more socially valuable than those folks. And last time we talked to folks at NIOSH, they mentioned that there were people on their teams that are even at like GS9 levels who had already been offered pay at a double the rate that they were being paid to do a similar job in the private sector, but they didn't want to take it because they wanted to stay at NIOSH to protect workers. And you said, and so that's kind of your experience when you talk to folks that you work at NIOSH, that you kind of feel like they could get better paying jobs, the folks on your team in the private sector.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If there's private sector jobs out there, right? That's also part of the problem. But if we were to find a job in the private sector, it would pay probably
right. Well,
more
I mean, that's a good thing to point out because it probably, unfortunately, the exact kind of job that you do, that, like you said, there's just not very many kinds of those jobs. And so what you would probably end up being hired to do would be it would probably be something like trying to cape for the company, trying to use science to try to make the case that the company is not actually hurting workers when they very clearly are, right? Those are the kinds of jobs that exist for, PhDs and like health science and stuff like that on the company side. And so that's obviously not something that folks like you would be interested in. And so, you were one of the folks who had been laid off. Can you talk to us about what that process, what did that process look like, for you and your coworkers, and how was it handled by the agency?
Yeah. So on April 1st, almost the entire agency got some type of reduction in force notice. Some people got a notice saying you are on immediate admin leave, losing access to the system, and you're going to be terminated on June 2nd. And then some of us got letters saying you're going to be terminated on June 30th and expect 60 days notice before we terminate you. So basically since April, everyone's kind of just been in this very tense, like, uncertainty doesn't even really do it justice for like the intensity of the emotion of what it feels like. Because you're sort of in this limbo, right? Where you're on admin leave, so you're still technically getting paid for 60 days, but also like, are you supposed to be looking for a new job during this time, or is there a chance we're going to get brought back? And so it was tough because on one hand I was like, well, maybe I should be looking for a new job in case this does actually go through. But then I will feel, stressed out if I start reaching out to like my contacts looking for new positions. And then at the last minute have to say, just kidding, I got my NIOSH job back and I, would prefer to go back to that. And everyone's been in this situation, right? They're like, what do we do? Do we commit to finding something new and, kind of give up on our agency to some extent? Or do we kind of wait it out and see what happens? And me getting brought back this week is kind of a perfect example of that, right? Is that without notice, suddenly I got my job back. It was just a like 3-sentence letter from an administrator in CDC that said, you've previously received notice that you were going to be impacted by a reduction in force with a termination date at July 2nd. That is no longer true. You're no longer impacted by the RIF. Come back to work tomorrow. And so that's what we had to do. But it's tough because it was only about 300 of us with an institute of about 1,000, right? So It's bittersweet because on one hand, like, I'm very glad I have my job back. Obviously, it's important work. On the other hand, I am devastated that my coworkers whose work is equally important, just maybe not as like spotlight, like the firefighter work, right? Because it's all of this is being made, like these decisions are being made politically, not based in science, not based in need. It's 100% federal employees and federal scientists being used as political pawns.
Right.
And so, so it's bittersweet. I'm happy to have my job. I'm sad that my coworkers don't have their jobs back yet. Go ahead.
Yeah, what parts of NIOSH are not functioning now? You mentioned that something like 900 people were laid off, something like 320 have been offered their jobs back, and so that still leaves like 600 people who don't have their jobs back. What are the jobs that they were doing? The DOGE argument would be that presumably these people were just kind of piddling around, not doing anything very valuable. Is that the case?
Absolutely not. Most of the people that are laid off are scientists that had very important, unique jobs, unique research areas. So right now, as I mentioned, NIOSH has a mandated mission from the 1970 Occupational Safety and Health Act to conduct risk assessment and develop recommended exposure limits to chemicals. So anytime there's a new chemical being introduced into industry, there's a whole slew of NIOSH scientists that look at that and see, what are workers' exposures, and then, do animal studies to see what are the potential health effects of those exposures, and then use all of that data to figure out, okay, if you're exposed to X amount of this chemical, you are likely to see health effects. And so therefore you want to keep exposures below that level. As part of that, there's also ventilation engineers that research how do you control exposure to that chemical? Like, how could you design the factory to have a lower level in the air? There's also, like I mentioned, the toxicologists that do the toxicity testing, not reinstated. And what is, people don't really think about this because it's not very visible work, but it's crucial to the functioning of basically all of NIOSH. NIOSH is the only agency that does I shouldn't say only agency, but they do the bulk of developing analytical methods for chemicals. So that's a question about, a chemical that you don't necessarily think about, that how do you even measure how much you're being exposed to? There are chemists that need to develop methods to be able to answer that question. How do you even measure it to even know how much is in the air? And none of those people were brought back. So right now, we actually have no way to develop measurement methods for any new chemical that we need to research. So yeah, and that, those are just a few off the top of my head, but there are so many parts of NIOSH that arguably impact more workers overall than the firefighter program and the Black Lung Surveillance Program, et cetera, that are still not reinstated. So yeah, many of NIOSH's like critical functions are still just completely dismantled at this particular moment.
Right. And so what about the plan that HHS released? I think it was just yesterday or the day before, that they want to fire the same number of workers from elsewhere. I mean, they're not even content to leave it at, okay, well, we are keeping 60% of the firings that we executed at NIOSH. We want to maintain that number, but we're going to, reinstate the firefighter and coal miner teams, but we're going to take some other number of 300 workers from elsewhere in the CDC. Again, like not even based on science or whatever. It's just that they want to keep that number of people off of the government workforce. And so what are you hearing about that plan, and do you have any ideas about where they're going to attack?
So we don't know where they're going to lay off the CDC employees, but they've already laid off a ton of CDC employees. So any more, the cuts have already been brutal for CDC and for NIOSH. And any more, it's going to be very detrimental to public health in this country. And it doesn't have to be that way. This isn't like a rule, like you can only have X amount of employees at CDC, right? Like this is an arbitrary thing that they are deciding. And it's also honestly a tactic to try to divide, trying to pit workers against each other. Like, oh, look, these workers got their jobs back. That means we have to let these other workers go. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just a numbers game, right? Which isn't true. It doesn't make sense to reinstate some critical functions at the detriment of other critical functions. It's like a zero-sum game that they've made up. And, when we heard that, we were so angry. And so the first thing we did as, the NIOSH employee unions, we connected with the CDC unions and said, hey, we need to release a joint statement speaking out against these cuts, because we need to show them that the CDC employee unions, the NIOSH employee unions are actually united, and you're not going to use this as a division tactic. It's not going to work. And we're going to make the argument for why it doesn't make sense to do this. And yeah, we released that statement yesterday because, we wanted to show like a show of strength and solidarity, and explain that this is not okay, and that everyone that is being let go is important. Right. We don't want to have another pandemic and be less prepared than we were last time.
Right.
You mentioned that these firings are political. Ultimately, they're not being based on science or data or fact, and that's true in a lot of ways. I've been having a lot of conversations about the cases that the unions are bringing against the government over the firings. And, people will ask me, like, okay, well, maybe it's true that the executive branch is doing this in a way that kind of violates the civil service protections and blah, 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 blah. And, but ultimately in the final analysis, doesn't the executive have the authority to fire people and lay off people? And like ultimately, my understanding of the law is like that. Yes, I mean that there are procedures that have to be followed that are not being followed in so many instances, and so that is a way that our unions can advocate for our members who are being unlawfully fired to try to get them their jobs back. But ultimately, it does seem to me that in the final analysis, if the executive branch wants to move forward with most of the firings that they have gone through, that they have the legal authority to do that. And that's why I think that these NIOSH rehirings, making the case that they are political is, it cuts both ways, right? Like it was not a court that ordered them to give you your job back. It was the political backlash to these super, super unpopular firings. And the whole DOGE project is unpopular, generally speaking. And so, I think that brings us to, I want to talk about the Federal Unionists Network and their theory of the case about how they are trying to fight not only the firings at NIOSH, but the firings everywhere and all of these negative actions that are being proposed against federal workers, because people... people are constantly telling me that they feel kind of hopeless. They feel like, nothing that they do, none of the marches that they're participating in matters. None of the letters that are being sent matter. None of it matters. It's all the Republicans have the power. Trump has the power, and they're not going to bend to, protests and stuff like that. And I think that your case is a clear indication that they have and that they can. And that's kind of an illustration of the theory that the Federal Unionist Network has, which you're very involved in. And so can you talk to us about that kind of generally and how much of a role you feel like, funds actions have played in your case specifically?
Yeah, so I actually met the folks at FUN at the same Labor Notes conference where I met you. And it's been interesting to see FUN grow from just a group chat of like a couple dozen to suddenly hundreds, thousands of people, federal unionists working together to fight back against these attacks on not only federal employees, but the important services we provide. Mm-hmm. And so, what's been super helpful for me with FUN is connecting to other federal employees who are union organizers and sharing strategies of, what are we doing to fight back against these attacks? And, we think about where do federal employee unions, where do we get our power from? And a lot of it is from like our constituents, from the people that we serve, right? And so with NIOSH, we're kind of in a unique position where even though we're like a relatively small agency, about 1,000-ish employees, we actually have a substantial amount of power because the constituents, the people that we serve, the people that rely on the work that we do are in part organized labor. And organized labor has a lot of power. And that's both private sector and public sector unions that rely on NIOSH's work. Any person that has a job relies on NIOSH's work. And I don't know if the agency realized who they were messing with when they came after NIOSH so hard. Because, there's been a lot of union backlash here. You probably heard this week there was a big lawsuit that was dropped by Public Citizen Litigation Group with AFL and a bunch of other unions signed on to that, basically arguing like this is illegal. We rely on NIOSH services. It's enshrined in law that NIOSH has to have these functions, and you've made them not be able to function. And that hurts us. That hurts our union members. That hurts workers across the country. And so, and so you can look at that for every federal agency. And that's something that FUN is doing, right? Is we're looking strategically at, okay, how do we leverage our power as federal employees to make sure that our jobs are protected, but also that the people that we serve are protected as well. And I think what NIOSH has been doing is a really good example of that.
Absolutely. Well, Micah, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you think is important that you want to leave our audience with before we let you go?
I think the key takeaway is that, NIOSH is the agency that makes sure that people don't have to choose between a paycheck and their health, that a hazard doesn't go unchecked, and that, we make sure that every single worker can go home to their family at the end of the day, safe and healthy. So when you're cutting NIOSH, you're not just getting rid of a bunch of federal scientists, you were actually putting workers' lives in danger. Like workers will die because NIOSH has been dismantled, right? That's kind of the bottom line here is it's life or death. It's not just some random budget cuts. This is very, very serious implications for what's happening here. We don't want to see what it looks like pre-OSH Act in today's society, right? Like the occupational illness and injury rate before 1970 was outrageous, and our working population has doubled since then. And so, yeah, it's really scary when I think about what could happen if they're, able to actually move forward with these cuts. But I do still have a lot of hope. So, next week, actually, we're rallying in DC outside of Department of Health and Human Services headquarters with National AFL and some of our other union supporters because apparently RFK can't hear us from Cincinnati. So we're going to go outside his office and yell at him from there to say, you are putting workers' lives in danger, and NIOSH employees and the working people who we serve are not okay with that. And we're going to fight back as hard as we can to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Dr. Micah Niemeyer-Walsh, appreciate your time. Dr. Niemeyer-Walsh is a part of the firefighter health team at NIOSH and vice president of the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE Local 3840. They have not been speaking on behalf of the agency during this conversation. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Solidarity.
Absolutely. Yep. All right, there we go, folks. We got some more stuff to get to. Lots of stuff happening last week. Let's talk about some DOGE news. The whole DOGE theory of government is that it is inefficient, it's rife with fraud. The people who do the work there are lazy government bureaucrats. They don't care about the mission. They don't care about anything. They're low productivity, stuff like that. And there were two really kind of fascinating stories last week of DOGE failures. And I want to start with one about Social Security, where Elon Musk and one of his DOGE bros makes a claim about how common fraud is within the Social Security system. Let's play this clip.
We learned 40% of the phone calls that they get are from fraudsters.
40%?
That's right. Almost half.
Yes, and they steal people's Social Security is what happens. Is they call in, they say, they claim to be a retiree, then they convince the Social Security person on the phone to change where the money's flowing. It actually goes to some fraudster. This is happening all day, every day. And then somebody doesn't receive their Social Security. It's because of all the fraud loopholes in the Social Security system.
All the fraud loopholes. And so they went and, it's amazing that they had the gall to say, oh, we found this, as if this is something that they had determined, actually. Well, based on that kind of hypothesis, 40% of calls into Social Security are fraudulent. They installed anti-fraud checks for benefit claims made over the phone early last month. And now the Social Security Administration is already considering walking back that policy because out of 110,000 calls that have been placed since the anti-fraud check was implemented, they found two cases that had a high probability of being fraudulent. Not even two cases that were determined to have been fraudulent, but two cases that had a high probability of being fraudulent. This is reporting coming out of nextgov.com. The title of the article is DOGE Went Looking for Phone Fraud at SSA and Found Almost None. Staff reporter Natalie Ames reported on the news story. But it is just so amazing that this is the kind of stuff that they're finding. And people are still believing this. Like, I saw a comment on Facebook from somebody that I know just last week about how she thinks that Elon Musk is trying to save the country when they're going out and either lying, they either lied about we determined that there are 40% of phone calls are fraudulent, or they are just so blatantly misinformed as to, almost be like a danger to themselves and others, physically, because they don't have the ability to kind of perceive reality and the world around them as it exists, really, right? I mean, that is so far from the mark. 40% was the claim. 2 calls out of 110,000 maybe was what they actually found. But that doesn't come at zero cost, right? Doing this anti-fraud measure, which is one of the things that people actually find frustrating with government, is all of the paperwork and all of the hoops that you have to jump through to get anything from the government, and all the requirements and blah, 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 right? That's actually the thing that makes government inefficient. A lot of the things, just like this one, are anti-fraud measures. And so you have to recognize that at some point, at a certain point, efficiency is an enemy of anti-fraud measures, right? And you have to do a cost-benefit analysis. You have to say, is it worth doing this anti-fraud check, or do we want to make it easier for folks who qualify to get their benefits that they have earned? Because this does not come at zero cost. What actually happened is that this anti-fraud measure slowed retirement claim processing by 25% for everybody, right? This is not just the 2 people who had potentially fraudulent claims. They're not the only ones that have to deal with this. Everybody had a 25% reduction in the speed with which their retirement claims were processed. It also led to a degradation of public service, according to an internal May document obtained by NextGov that examined potentially cutting the anti-fraud tool for phone claims. And so that's what you get. And also it is worth noting that degradations to service are also benefit cuts. If it takes 25% longer and it takes 2 weeks or something, it takes 2 weeks for me to get my retirement claims started rather than 2 days, or it takes 4 weeks rather than 2 weeks, I have missed out on a check, right? I've missed out on a check. I will never get that check back. There is no procedure by which the government will retroactively pay me for what I would have been owed. You just lose that check indefinitely. It's a benefit cut. And it also makes government less efficient. It makes it more difficult. There is more friction between the acquisition of earned benefits on the part of beneficiaries, and there's more friction there with them getting that. It's just insane. And there was another story, too. That wasn't the only one. There was one of the Doge bros who gave an interview to Fast Company. Fast Company is a business publication. This Doge bro was the co-founder of Gumroad, some sort of tech thing. I don't know what Gumroad does. But he's supposed to be like a real fancy-smancy tech guy. He knows his tech stuff. That's this guy. His name is Sahil Lavingia. And he was put at the VA, the Veterans Affairs Administration. And and this interview is really just kind of fascinating, the things that it reveals about these people. And I would encourage folks to go read it themselves if they would like. The title of the interview is "Thanks to Doge, Gumroad's founder has a second job with the VA." The author is Ernie Smith. So check that out. Google it. Fast Company, Ernie Smith. It's a good article. And what this guy admits to Fast Company is really just fascinating. So he says, now that he's there, speaking about Langvia or whatever his name is, the Doge guy at the VA, now that he's there, he says he finds himself surrounded by people who, quote, love their jobs, who came to the government with a sense of mission driving their work. This is what the tech startup Doge guy is saying about employees at the VA. Quote, in a sense, that makes the Doge agenda a little bit more complicated because if half the government took a buyout offer, then we wouldn't have to do much more, he says, implying software can replace departing employees. We just basically use software to plug the holes, but that's not what's happening. He says, the government works. He says there's a culture shock because it's a lot of meetings, not a lot of decisions, but honestly, quote, but honestly, it's kind of fine because the government works. It's not as inefficient as I was expecting, to be honest. I was hoping for more easy wins. I mean, that's just an amazing admission. That really is just an amazing admission, because that really is going counter to like the entire thing, the entire whole Doge project, because the whole Doge project is built on a lie, right? It's not true. And then we got one right now. We've got this guy in the chat, True American, really 40%. I bet it's even higher. Why would you think that? Why would you think more than 40% of calls into the Social Security Administration are fraudulent? Like, on what basis do you have that belief? And then he says, oh, please, it's money laundering. That's not even what I am telling you that the Doge freaks are saying. They created, it's not me, I didn't create this anti-fraud check, this anti-fraud measure, and so you can't say that, look, Jacob created it, and he's obviously got this bias against finding fraud. He wants all the fraud to exist because he's just a government guy, he loves government. This is the Doge people created an anti-fraud check, and it found 2 calls out of 110,000 had a high probability of being fraudulent. And this guy is not believing it. Like, it's crazy. I'm telling him that the Doge people are saying it's wrong, and he's like, no, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Right? I mean, it's like crazy. Right, and you believe whatever you want with no evidence like yourself. Meanwhile, Doge is actually showing evidence and has access to view the files. And you're not believing what Doge is telling you. I don't know what, I don't know what to, that's crazy.
I mean, some people believe that, humans coexisted with dinosaurs. Some people believe the Earth is flat.
That's an easier thing to believe than this. Because at least with the humans coexisting with dinosaurs, you can't, just go and look at it. Right? Or right now, you can just go and look at this and say, you can, suspend all sorts of disbelief to believe that humans and dinosaurs coexist and stuff like that. But, this is just right here in your face. The guy who is who would be telling you the thing that you want to hear is telling you that you're wrong. And I don't know. So there you go. 2 more Doge failures this week. They're going to keep racking up the failures, and people are going to keep believing that they're not failing. That's kind of the world that we live in right now. 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857 if you have any thoughts on that.
The good news is, I think the vast majority of people do not believe it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's what we have to remember. Yeah, there are some knuckleheads out there who are going to believe all sorts of foolish things, but I think most people can see through it. It's just a matter of organizing folks.
Absolutely. Yeah, and most people are opposed. Most people are not even opposed to the mission of Doge. They want government to be efficient, which who doesn't? There was this poll that was talking about, most people want the government to be more efficient. And it's like, what does that even mean?
Right. I mean, there's also polling that shows over 70% of the American public opposes postal privatization.
Right.
But, in the eyes of some people, efficiency is privatization. So, it's a little more complicated than that, I think.
But when asked about Doge specifically, how is it executing its mission, people are overwhelmingly dissatisfied with the job that they are doing, Republicans and Democrats. And so, people that don't see that are kind of in the minority. Here's another story from last week. Bosses are really upset about the idea of having to protect their workers from the heat. They're really upset about this. And so there was this last year, the Biden administration proposed a rule about heat protection, and it put forward some standards about how how employers should protect their workers from the heat. There was a hearing last week about OSHA kind of generally, but a lot of the conversation really focused on this heat rule. So I'm not going to tell you what the rule is right now. Let's just listen to how these politicians and bosses are reacting to this heat rule, and then let's kind of hypothesize about like what, they seem really upset. What could they be being asked to do? So this is how the bosses and politicians reacted, are talking about this heat rule that was proposed by OSHA last year.
And the proposed heat standard, while addressing a real concern, takes a one-size-fits-all approach that fails to account for a wide range of conditions and different industries and regions.
One problematic regulation is the proposed heat rule. A one-size-fits-all heat standard ignores the work manufacturers already do to protect our employees, and it ignores the unique ways in which it is done. When it comes to heat, what makes sense for Maine does not make sense in Texas.
As currently proposed, OSHA's heat, illness, and injury prevention rule is unworkable, overly prescriptive, and out of step with the practical realities and operational needs. It's a one-size-fits-all framework that fails to account for a wide variation in work environments across industries, including differences in job functions and geographic climates.
It would definitely increase cost and likely decrease productivity. So it's going to get in the way of making progress on the things that we're trying to do.
Mr. Parson, so to be clear, your organization, y'all are advocating against the heat standard as proposed under the last administration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The Biden administration's OSHA issued a rushed proposal on heat injury and illness prevention that had the potential to wreak havoc on businesses and communities across the country.
To wreak havoc. I think she misspoke. She misspoke there, but that's okay. She meant that this rule would wreak havoc on businesses. I mean, this sounds like a pretty big rule. Like what, Adam, I hope you're not looking at the show notes too closely. Do you remember the heat rule? Do you remember what it was?
I do not remember the specifics of the heat rule.
And so they seem really upset about this. Like, what do you think could be generating this reaction among the employer class?
I mean, to havoc. I don't know. I mean, it must, you would think for it to be havoc, it would entail like some severe restrictions on hours worked, or like, you can't let people work outside if it's, above a certain degree. Or
yeah. Like it would wreak havoc if people were not allowed to work in 95-degree weather. Right. Like that would actually be like problematic economically if we didn't allow people to work in 95-degree weather, like in the South, because there's a lot of 95-degree days in the South, right? You got to still work. Right. So you maybe it's something like that, right? Maybe the heat rule is something like that. So they did actually say what the heat rule is, kind of the big part of it. And so we've got a clip of somebody explaining this heat rule. So let's play this.
As you know, in the mountains and farmland of Kentucky, where Hinkle operates, employers have adapted to muggy summer temperatures. Kentucky businesses follow federal OSHA standards and are able to meet the needs of their employees as they see fit. OSHA is set to conduct a public hearing on June 16th to review a proposed federal heat standard. The proposed changes include the implementation of a mandatory 15-minute rest break every 2 hours when the heat index is 90 degrees or higher.
Whoa! Hold on. That sounds like communism.
A whole 15 minutes?
A whole 15 minutes every 2 hours if the temperature is over 90 degrees.
Well, the heat index.
The heat
right?
index.
It's even more expansive than you
right,
described, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't sell it short. Wow.
Yeah.
I could see where that would really just gum up the works. And really, probably doom the GDP.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, there are a couple of other things, but that is the thing. I mean, that's the thing that he pointed to, right? As the big scary thing. There are a couple of other things, and we'll talk about those, but that's the biggest thing, is that if the heat index is over 90 degrees, you have to give your employees 15-minute breaks every 2 hours paid. That's the huge thing that they were doing all of this stuff. Everybody was so upset about big one-size-fits-all rule. It's going to wreak havoc on businesses in the nation. 15 minutes every 2 hours if the heat index is over 90 degrees. I mean, you have to really, I don't understand how you can kind of sit there and play the victim when the thing that you are opposing is something as simple as this. I mean, it really is. It would even be one thing to say, I'm prepared to follow the law. I think it's just, I think maybe that it should be 3 hours, every 3 hours instead of every 2 hours. I think that would make a little bit more sense based on the data or whatever. But I'm prepared to follow, whatever OSHA ultimately ends up saying. But, I just think that every 3 hours would be more appropriate instead of every 2 hours. That would even be okay, whatever, fine. Maybe, because I haven't seen the science. Maybe there's an argument that it should be 3 hours instead of every 2 hours. Maybe there's an argument that it should be every hour and a half instead of 2 hours. I don't know. But the OSHA people have presumably looked at the science, right? The OSHA people aren't just making this stuff up willy-nilly. They did it after long periods of comment. They did it after consultations with industry and labor. And so, it's not just coming out of nowhere, but it would be one thing if industry was like, I disagree a little bit around the edges, but, ultimately that's fine. They're literally acting like the sky is falling. Wreak havoc on the economy, right? I mean, that's just how do you do that with a straight face, right? I mean, that would be I can't, it's almost difficult to kind of, it's almost difficult to think of an equivalent thing on the other side where somebody would be like, the sky is falling over something so small. I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy. These people are deranged, wicked. Satan has his hands all over their souls. Let's continue.
Of a mandatory 15-minute rest break every 2 hours when the heat index is 90 degrees or higher. Can you provide some context around how this standard would disrupt employers' heat protection plans, which are working in states like Kentucky?
I appreciate the question. It's a good one and something I've been thinking about a lot in preparation for this testimony. It sounds easier than it would actually be to implement. And so if you think about how that would actually apply in a business like Hinkle or like ours.
Okay, now let's pause here for a second, because now we've just been talking about how this is such an easy thing, right? This is just such an easy thing that would be, and so maybe Adam, maybe there's something that we haven't thought of, right? It's possible there's just something some super niche thing that we haven't thought of that would make it very, very difficult to allow people to take breaks once every 2 hours. Maybe there's something that we haven't thought of. So let's listen to this. Let's listen to the boss. Let's see what he says. Maybe he's got something convincing.
Route paving or you're crushing rock in a quarry, to be able to manage the schedule that way, rather than when someone needs a break, they're allowed to take a break.
Huh.
Yeah. And so I think we're not little kids, and so we don't necessarily need a rule that says everything we need to do. Mm-hmm. We do right by our people. We put safety first, and that's worked great for us. To your point, it's worked well.
I wonder if the bureaucrat that wrote that regulation had ever worked 15 minutes in 90-degree weather doing manual labor.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I wonder if any of you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my first reaction.
So there's his argument is that it would be hard to figure out the schedules. Would it actually be that hard? I don't think so. I was an assistant manager at a restaurant. And so I have made schedules before, actually. I actually made schedules for an entire week for a business of like 30 people. I made those schedules multiple times. And it took me something like 30 minutes to do the whole scheduling for a whole business for a whole week. And he's saying that like, oh no, it's going to be too hard for me. It's going to be too hard for me as the business owner, as I'm inside. I got to figure out the schedules.
Right. Well, I mean, speaking as someone who has worked out in the heat plenty and has enjoyed union benefits of a mandatory break, it's not that hard. It's really not that hard. When the time comes, you stop working. And if management wants to continue working, that's their prerogative. Mm-hmm. But we don't, right? And that's a benefit of a union contract and having that protection. We have guaranteed breaks every 2 to 2.5 hours, and so we are able to do that. And if they have a problem with it, they can take it up with our steward. But there's so many workers who are not covered by a union contract. Over 90% in the private sector, right? And also I saw the comment from True American about, not getting that currently. Well, you should.
Yeah.
You absolutely should. I mean, something we've talked about on this show is how many state and local government employees are not covered by OSHA, right? In Alabama, they're not. And I know that's the case in some other states as well. So, but this rule is very mild, 15 minutes every 2 hours when it is dangerous heat is something that can easily be accommodated.
Right.
Right. You're telling me that you cannot accommodate that, but you put safety first. Mm-hmm. You don't put safety first. You put profits first because you're a company. That's how it works. You are obligated to put your profits first to your shareholders, and that's what you do. And that's why we as workers have to organize for these sorts of protections, whether it's in our union contracts or through federal rules and regulations and laws. Ideally, we're pushing it at all ends to win these sort of protections. And it's critical now more than ever because it's getting hotter. Mm-hmm. It's going to keep getting hotter because the fossil fuel folks would rather nuke our planet
right.
than sacrifice profits, right? We're sacrificing the long-term viability of our ecosystem for short-term profits. It's going to continue to get hotter. We're down here in the South where it's already really hot and humid a lot of the year. And, workers continue to die on the job due to heat. We hear about it all the time. Whether it was
something like a 30% increase year over year from 22 to 23. I mean, it's getting more of a problem. Like 55 workers died in 1 year because of heat. Most of those in the South.
Which goes to, you spoke about the process a little bit. Like OSHA just didn't willy-nilly do this. And neither did the Biden administration, right? Mm-hmm. Like it was pressure, years of pressure built up to this. It was case after case after case of a worker dying on the job that built up to this. But, industry tells us that they can't do it.
Yeah, it is so gross. And it's important to have the, and they've been talking about like, well, why don't you just let the workers take breaks when they need them? Right? Why don't just do it when they need them instead of having a mandated
How does
break?
that work in practice, right?
Exactly. That's the problem is that in practice, what happens if you say that, workers are allowed to take breaks whenever they want, workers are going to inevitably be pressured by managers not to take a break. They could potentially be discriminated against if they do assert their right to take a break, and they could be retaliated against or fired for that, and managers will, pressure them not to take a break.
Right.
And they may even say, you're taking too many breaks. If you just say, like, no, you have to give workers a break every 2 hours for 15 minutes, then the workers will have much more freedom to take advantage of that right, because it's not like they have a right to exercise their judgment. It's like they have a right to a thing affirmatively. right? And that's much easier for a worker to kind of feel like they can stand up, with their back straight and say, no, this is mine.
Yeah, I mean, in the industry, folks say they don't want rules. They don't need rules. They're not children. But, the reality is when you don't have those rules, the workers get screwed, right? It's what you described. It's also the inequities that show up because Johnny is cousins with his manager. He gets to take a break, but you don't. Right. It's all those sorts of things that happen. Your manager's cool, so you get to take a break, but this other manager over here is a jerk who, drives them to the ground, so they never get a break. It's those sorts of daily injustices that so many workers face on the job. That's why rules can be helpful. That's why you look for guardrails. That's why we fight for union contracts. Collective bargaining agreements are not the end all be all, but they are important because of that. Because there is a basic floor that is established in the workplace that no, you have to meet these certain guidelines. You have to follow these certain rules. You actually have to follow what the contract says. And if you don't, we're going to hold you accountable. And it's really unfortunate we have so many workers out there who do not have that kind of protection and security because you shouldn't have to choose between your own safety and putting food on your table. And that is the choice that so many workers in this country, particularly here in the South, face.
Right. So there you go. People are really upset about the rule. And just to button this up, what's unfortunately probably going to be the case is that the rule will be scrapped by the Trump administration because the Trump administration in so many ways is beholden to employers. And so, it's really frustrating. We've had this TikTok clip that we've been sitting on for the last few weeks. It's not been super, it's not been really
urgent.
Yeah, it's not been super urgent because it's not connected to anything in the news. So we've just been saving it. But I want to go ahead and react to it. This is our last segment for today, and it's a boss on TikTok talking about behavior that he hates to see in his employees, and so it's really funny, I thought. Gosh. And so let's take a look at this first clip. He posted 2 TikToks, so let's take a look at the first one.
Unpopular opinion. If you're using the words "I don't have the capacity" or "I'm out of bandwidth," please
pause it for
stop.
a second. So. Unpopular opinion, oftentimes unpopular opinions are unpopular for a reason, right? There's a lot of times that's the case because it's probably a bad opinion. But also, he's saying, okay, you don't have capacity, you don't have bandwidth. Stop saying that. Do you think maybe he's going to say you don't have to justify, taking a break or whatever. You need to take care of you. Any guesses as to what he's going to say?
I'm going to assume he says you shouldn't say that because you can, in fact, actually take on more. Don't tell me your plate is full. I'm going to scoop more on your plate. We're going to make it work. Okay. I feel like that's his vibe.
I don't know. I mean, look, he looks like a nice guy. Look at that face.
Right.
That's a nice looking fella right there. Look at this.
Sure.
Can you see it? Or are you?
Yeah. I see him.
See it. Okay. Yeah. He is a nice looking feller. Maybe let's. Yeah. You're being too mean to him, Adam. Let's hear him out.
I heard that the other day. It's corporate lingo for "I don't manage my time well" in reality, or "I said yes to the wrong things." You may think that it sounds polished, but it just really doesn't. The truth is, you make time for what really matters. Always. The best employees don't whine about their capacity. They prioritize, communicate, and execute. So please stop saying you don't have the bandwidth or capacity. Start saying what's actually true. I didn't make this a priority. I will get to it. Now you're in control, not your calendar.
Okay, well, there we go.
And I'm sure he would respond really well when his employees say, "I'm sorry, sir, I did not make that a priority. I'm going to jump right on it now, though." yeah, I'm sure he's going to be really understanding to that.
Yeah, well, and typically, right, when you say something like that, when you say, like, I don't have the bandwidth, what the implication there is that I feel, I have kind of internally assessed the priorities of the tasks that I have been given, and it does not seem to me that the task that you are trying to put on my plate is more important than the tasks that I already have on my plate, and I'm already working, a full-time job, and so I don't have, like, that's kind of like,
Right.
when you say that, that's kind of the thing that you are communicating, right? And so if he, as an employer, has a problem with that, the thing that he should do is not, be upset about his employees, asserting their, letting him know what their schedule is like and saying, look, you've already given me all of these other tasks that seem to me to be more important. He shouldn't get upset at that. He should say, okay, well, if the new task is actually the most urgent thing, he should go and identify something to take off of their plate so that they can prioritize this new task, right? Because the role of management is of supervision, direction, and prioritization, right? I'm a little worker bee, and so, like, most of the time, if you are just, a worker bee, like, you are given tasks and you have to execute. It is not your job to figure out, like, oh, what's the most high priority thing, blah, 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 blah. You're given a list of tasks and you go and do, right? Right, yeah. That was something else that was funny. He said, if you, it's bad when you say that you don't have capacity because that means you've said yes to the wrong things. Well, who is the person that they said yes to? Presumably you, right? As the boss. Right. Why are you giving them things to do that they shouldn't be doing?
Right.
And then if you are giving them tasks that you for some reason want them to turn down, but you also don't like them saying I don't have capacity, then what do you want them to do? And it sounds like, the thing that he said at the end was, oh, well, you need to just, you need to say, oh, I wasn't prioritizing that. Let me go and do it now. And so is his goal just, for the employee to be constantly juggling the thing that was most recently given to them and never, like, execute and finish a task? I mean, it's ridiculous.
I mean, I've encountered managers who are like that. It's always like every new thing, every latest thing is the most important, urgent thing. And it's like, drop everything you're working on. I've got something for you. And it's like, wait a second, but you just did this last week, right? Well, you just did we had the same song and dance last week. I had to drop everything for this urgent thing. And now you're telling me this is more urgent. So what do we do with the thing from last week, right? I think that's a frustration that people have pretty commonly. I mean, and that's something else. Like, people assume, I think falsely, that people made it into management for some good reason.
Right.
People aren't always in management because of how smart or efficient or what great leaders they are.
Yeah.
There are various reasons why people end up in those positions. And, sometimes they're not even really expected to be smart or efficient or good leaders. That's not even why they're there.
Right.
So that's something else we deal with a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. There's even the Peter principle, right? Is that you get, you're good at one thing, and so then you get promoted until you stop being good at the thing that you've been promoted to. And then, so that leaves at all levels of the hierarchy, like people who are just kind of incompetent at the thing that they have been promoted to do. And so, it's so silly. So, this guy, not a boss, because, or not necessarily a boss because he's just so great at people management and stuff like that. So, as you can imagine, people were like, wow, that's dumb. That's a really stupid thing that you just said. And he didn't like the response to that. So he tried to do a second take. So let's react to his take two.
73,000 views, 1,200 comments, and still going. And a whole lot of people think that I am a terrible boss because I challenge two words: capacity and bandwidth. Believe me, I actually
let's just hold on for a second. Is that why? Because just in the ether, like out of nothing, you said, I don't like the word capacity and bandwidth, and there's no other context.
Right. You should use better words.
Yeah, or like we don't like you because you're an advocate of utilization of thesauruses.
Right.
Is that why people were upset at you? I don't think so. I think there was like other context actually that was going on there. Let's see if he so not off to a great start on take 2, but maybe he self-corrects.
The workplace is overwhelming. Many people hate their jobs. But here's what I was trying to say, and I obviously didn't say it clearly enough. If we use phrases like I'm at capacity or I don't have bandwidth as a default, we start living in reactive mode. We stop growing. We stop taking control. I'm not saying burnout isn't real. I'm saying growth rarely happens when you're comfortable. And sometimes the people who believe in you the most will challenge your limits, not to break you, but to build you. Because hopefully one day you will be in a role where these excuses don't work, where your ability to handle pressure is the difference between success and regret. So no, I don't think I'm a terrible boss. I'm just not okay with seeing people limit themselves. And maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't either.
There we go. People are just limiting themselves by not doing 2, 3, or 4 jobs. When you say, no, I can't staff the restaurant by myself, literally by myself. That's not a thing that I can do. You're just limiting yourself.
Right. What if you tried it?
Yeah. What if you tried it? Yeah. There was one shift where I did run the restaurant. It was just 2 of us during a rush hour. And so we were, it was terrible. It was awful. And people's food was late and, it was super difficult. And so, but he would say that we were just limiting ourselves because we were not moving faster and being more efficient with our time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, imagine if you were the owner and you couldn't use such excuses, right?
Right. Yeah. So that was, that was fun. Gus says in the comments, turns out I'm amazing, actually. Source me.
Yeah. A hit dog will holler, and I don't know. If you have to make a second video to say what a not terrible boss you are, I don't know. Let's look at his reviews. Oh yeah, he says most people hate their jobs, and I think he's probably right, but I also wonder, do most people hate working for you? Wonder what his Glassdoor reviews look like online and that kind of thing. That'd be fun to look at.
That's a good question. Maybe see if we didn't limit ourselves, we could have done that before the show.
I know.
But we limit ourselves.
I know.
Because we're always saying like, oh, I'm at capacity. I don't have any more bandwidth.
Right. I'm always like, I'm working 3 jobs when I could work 4. Why limit myself to 3? Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. Well, all right, there you go, folks. Leave us a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR, if you have any thoughts. That's going to be it for us today. Adam, do you have any plugs that you want to get to before we wrap up?
Just as always, go to labornotes.org/events. They've got some cool trainings coming up in May, and don't forget the New Orleans Troublemaker School is May 31st, and for those of you in Alabama Rise will hold a legislative wrap-up online on May 20th. That's next week. It's at 6 p.m. So if you want to hear a little bit more detail than what we went into today on the show about the legislative session, the good, the bad, the ugly, what passed, what didn't pass, here's some updates from policy experts and people who were down there at the State House lobbying. Definitely tune into that, allarise.org. So yeah, check out Labor Notes trainings. Check that legislative wrap-up out if you are in Alabama. Otherwise, leave us a voicemail throughout the week. We really do appreciate that. And if you have ideas or questions, comments, anything, we love the feedback. And one thing I wanted to make sure I shared was occasionally people tell us we should go on so-and-so show. Or that so-and-so should come on our show. help us do that, right? If there's a show that you listen to all the time and you think we should be guests on there, reach out to that show and let them know that you listen to us, you listen to them, you want to make that happen. And same with potential guests for the Valley Labor Report. If there are folks that you listen to online or on the radio or whatever, reach out to us, let us know, and see if you can make a connection, and we're happy to do that.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you next week.